Chapter 486. Today's fourth update has been delivered. He saw that old Huang's face had become very gratified as he spoke till here. Then, he continued, however, we need to separate these two matters. Our main objective is to obtain the bone-tempering pills. So, we can't afford to make any mistakes in this regard. Moreover, the Huang family's enmity must be avenged. So, old Huang should have a plan for this matter, right? His words were extremely slick. It could be said that he didn't want to offend anyone. But, he had pointed out that the bone-tempering pills couldn't be lost. And, this was the most important thing. Old Huang pondered for a while and said, it has already been determined that the bone-tempering pills are related to the Jun and Tang family. So, we can take action now, and force them to reveal the whereabouts of the bone-tempering pills. Or, we can find out who the person who refined the bone-tempering pills is. Then, we can get our hands on the formula of the bone-tempering pills. Then, all our problems will be solved. And, it doesn't matter if it's the Jun family, the Tang family, or the Dugu family. Then, we can slaughter them without any misgivings. What old Huang says is correct. But, we can't take any action against the Jun and Tang family until the matter of the bone-tempering pills is settled, the young lord said calmly. That's natural. However, it's impossible to force them to reveal the whereabouts of the bone-tempering pills by relying on the strength of our Huang family. I'm afraid that we'll need some of our people to take action. That's the only way. Old Huang looked at the other purple-robed men, and smiled sinisterly. The young lord nodded slightly. Those men cupped their fists, and saluted, we won't pass on this responsibility for the sake of the Blood Sea. Old Huang nodded and said, there's no time to lose. We can take action tonight. He rolled his eyes. Then, a pair of sharp eyes shot out like a pair of arrows. They carried an incomparable murderous aura. It was a dark and windy night. Murder and arson. Jun Moxie's prophecy had unfortunately come true. Tang Yuan couldn't help but curse that this guy was a jinx. Whatever he said would happen. And, it wouldn't be good either. The aristocratic hall was in a state of apprehension. Countless experts came and went with a whistling sound. And, they came and went with a whistling sound. They came and went with a whistling sound. They came and went without rest. It was a particularly big night. The two Tianxian experts, Hai Feng and Song Shang, had dealt with 3 or 4 waves of people in succession. So, each wave wasn't easy to deal with. So, the 2 experts were already very tired. They were just about to take a bath and rest when another wave arrived. So, the 2 of them became very angry. Damn it, I'm not even allowed to sleep. Therefore, the 2 experts chased after them in a frenzy. Their eyes were bloodshot, and they chased after the group of people until they were like chickens flying and dogs jumping. Only after they had vented out the anger in their hearts did they return triumphantly. But when they returned, Tang Yuan's side was already done. Hai Feng and Jun Xie had just chased after them when the window of Tang Yuan's bedroom suddenly opened in silence. 2 silhouettes floated into the room like floating clouds. Tang Yuan was still snoring loudly on the bed, shaking the earth. Looking at the huge creature on the bed, the 2 of them looked at each other and shook their heads at the same time. This guy is too fat. They had originally planned to capture this guy and slowly interrogate him. But, they dispelled this idea when they saw that his body was comparable to an elephant's. It would be very difficult to leave the aristocratic hall's front door while carrying such a big fatty. Let alone sneaking away without making a sound. The target was too big. There was simply no place to hide. Moreover, this was a test of one's strength. Moreover, looking at this guy's fat body was disgusting. So, there was no need to carry him. So, it was better to simply interrogate him on the spot. It had to be said that being fat wasn't a good thing. But, it was a good thing for Tang Yuan to encounter such a situation. And, it was a very good thing. God knows how much suffering he would have to suffer if he had been kidnapped by these two. He may not have been able to return even if he confessed everything. It was obvious that there were gains and losses in everything. And there were gains and losses. Everything was predetermined. The two of them floated over to the bed. They stretched out their hands and patted Tang Yuan's head. Tang Yuan turned over, and his muscles bulged as he continued to snore. The two of them looked at each other in amazement. They had never imagined that this guy would be so unvigilant. He hadn't woken up after being patted on the head. Slap. 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 Young Master Tang was still sleeping soundly. One of them got angry. He grabbed the collar of Tang Yuan's pajamas and pulled him up from the bed. His belly was so slippery that it covered his feet. Tang Yuan's hands drooped down. His head was tilted to one side, and his saliva dripped down. His snoring didn't stop. I give up. One of the black-clothed men was angry and amused at the same time. He sighed. This old man has lived for nearly 200 years. And this is the first time I've seen someone who can sleep so much. Didn't this guy sleep in his previous life? He hasn't woken up even after such a torment. This is simply unheard of. Let's give him a painful one. I guarantee that he will wake up immediately. The other man suggested. We can't. If we do that, I'm afraid that Fatty's howl will shake the entire 9 cities. It won't be nice if we make too much noise. The black-clothed man holding Tang Yuan sighed. He reached out with his other hand and pinched Fatty Tang's nose. It felt greasy in his hand, as if he was pinching a piece of pig intestine that hadn't been processed. The black-clothed man suppressed his disgust and continued to pinch. Tang Yuan suddenly felt that his breathing wasn't smooth in his sleep. He opened his mouth and panted a few times. He snorted a few times before he opened his eyes in a daze. He coughed and spat out a mouthful of phlegm. The black-clothed man was pinching his nose. He had never imagined that this fatty, who was a young master of an aristocratic family, would be so tasteless. He didn't even think of dodging and was spat on his neck. He immediately felt the greasy and unbearable feeling and almost vomited. He wiped it away in a flurry and roared fiercely, "Fatty! Don't fucking move. This old man will wring your fat neck if you dare to move recklessly." Tang Yuan was startled to realize that he had fallen into such a dangerous situation. He was about to cry out in alarm when he opened his small round eyes. But he heard this threat. So he immediately held back his cry. His throat issued a few sounds similar to those of a hen laying eggs. But he remained pitiful and didn't say anything. "I ask you, where is that bone-tempering pill? Quickly hand it over to me." "I'll spare your life if you obediently hand it over," the black-clothed man asked in a ferocious manner. He was a man who had cultivated his mind and temperament for many years. So he wouldn't get angry so easily. But he had failed miserably this time. This wretched fatty had spat a mouthful of phlegm on his neck even though he didn't have the strength to fight back. So there was no need to mention the disgusting feeling in his heart. Bone-tempering pill. Tang Yuan was still in a daze. He finally woke up with a start. Then he blinked his eyes and let out a hollow howl. "Jun Moxie. You really have a crow's mouth, you shut up. You don't want to live, do you?" The black-clothed man almost went berserk. He grabbed his fat and ferociously twisted it. Then he covered his mouth with his hand. Tang Yuan's cry of pain was choked in his throat. He was in so much pain that his entire body trembled. Bone-tempering pill. Where is it? Who was the one who refined the elixir? Where is the prescription? "Fatty, I'll pull out your fat bit by bit if you don't tell me." The black-clothed man threatened in a ferocious manner. I'll talk. I'll talk. A wise man knows better than to fight when the odds are against him. Tang Yuan immediately decided to give in. Hiss, but you, first, let go of my breast. It turned out that the black-masked man's grab and twist had directly grabbed onto his chest. The black-clothed man was startled when he heard the last few words. Then, he flew into a rage. What milk, grass do you have there? Only then did he realize where he was grabbing, but it was right there. He couldn't help but curse and quickly let go, only to feel that his hands suddenly felt very uncomfortable. Damn it, this old man's reputation of more than 100 years has been ruined by this fatty. He actually grabbed a man's thing. This fatty is really too fat, you brat, quickly tell me. The old man was driven mad. I don't know who refined the bone-tempering pill either. Tang Yuan sucked in a breath of cold air with a hissing sound. He then hastily said, as for the prescription. I don't know. I'm just an assistant in the auction, fuck your mother. You dare to fool us? The black-clothed man flew into a rage. He grabbed Yi Xuan's neck. Tang Yuan's eyes rolled back as he was pinched. However, Tang Yuan respected his mother the most. So, he had already surrendered. But, when he heard the black-clothed masked man insult his mother, he immediately became furious. He completely forgot about the dangerous situation he was in at the moment. He struggled and cursed, fuck, your grandmother. I didn't finish speaking, you old bastard, you dare, call me an old, mother. Ah, spare me. Tang Yuan couldn't breathe anymore. So, he immediately started to beg for mercy. A wise man knew better than to fight when the odds were against him. Bang! Bang! Tang Yuan's mouth was covered again. This time, his forehead was in so much pain that beads of sweat started to drip down. He had suffered 2 fierce blows because of this curse. Go on. Tell us the truth, the black-clothed man said in a bad mood. Tang Yuan was finally convinced after suffering a few more times. So, he started to confess everything in an urgent and quick manner, but, the bone-tempering pills aren't with me. Those precious pills have always been kept at the Jun family's residence. And, those other things were secretly delivered to the Jun family before the auction. After all, those things are too precious. It's not safe to leave them in the aristocratic hall. I can't afford to pay for them if they go missing. The Jun family? The 2 black-clothed masked men looked at each other and nodded. Fatty's explanation was reasonable. And, it was in line with their analysis. Where is it in the Jun family's possession? Bastard! The Jun family is so big. How can we find it? You're useless, boy. You can die now, the black-clothed masked man asked in a low voice. Don't kill me. I'm telling you, that thing is in the elegant fragrance courtyard. Tang Yuan was panic-stricken. Spare my life. I've told you everything. Please don't kill me, cowardly trash. The elegant fragrance courtyard is the place where Jun Moxie's mistress, Guan Qinghan, lives. The 2 black-clothed men looked at each other and nodded. It seems that they have a very good understanding of the Jun family. Yes. It's there. Tang Yuan nodded like a chicken pecking at rice. Chapter 487. Today's first night watch. Please forgive me for being late. 10 minutes after the second watch. Tang Yuan cursed in his heart, your grandfather isn't afraid of death. Your grandfather is trying to trick you 2 idiots into going to your deaths. However, his mouth kept on begging for mercy. 2 great heroes, I've told you everything. I'm just a laborer. I don't have any status in the aristocratic hall. 2 great heroes. I have a pitiful 80-year-old mother, and I have a crying child waiting to be fed. You're so merciful, huh? Why isn't there anyone here? He hadn't even finished speaking when the 2 black-clothed masked men shuddered in unison. This is too shameless. This fatty is shameless in begging for mercy. 80-year-old mother, and a crying child waiting to be fed. Fu *k, you're not married yet, right? Your mother isn't even 40 years old according to the intelligence. How can you be an 80-year-old mother? An 80-year-old woman is qualified to be your great-grandmother. He looked at the fat on their bodies, and realized that these two men were people of great status. So, he didn't even have the interest to touch them. After all, he would have to settle accounts with this fatty in the future. So, it wouldn't be good if he couldn't find the bone-tempering pills if he were to dispose of him now. After all, this fatty would be in charge of the auction when the time came. So, he couldn't die. Their bodies flashed, and they flew away at an extremely fast speed. Perhaps I'll die of disgust if I stay with this fatty any longer. Tang Yuan closed his eyes and begged for mercy for a long time. But, he didn't know when they had left when he opened his eyes. Everything he had experienced felt like a dream. He fiercely pinched himself and screamed in pain. Then, he crawled up while trembling, and lit a lamp. He looked at the bruises on his body. Moreover, the marks on his neck were still hurting. Fatty stood there in a daze. Then, he finally came back to his senses. A sharp, pained and frightened voice cried out, as if it was the voice of a father who had died and a mother who had remarried, "Help! Help! Something big has happened." His loud and clear voice reverberated in the silence of the night like a high-octave tenor. Not only the aristocratic hall, but all the people who had been sleeping in the vicinity of the aristocratic hall had also been startled awake by this voice. This sound was too horrifying. In the distance, the two masked men in black who were flying at high speed staggered and almost fell to the ground. Both of them didn't remember hurting Fatty, so why was he screaming so miserably? By the time Hai Chen-feng and Song Shang had returned, Tang Yuan was sitting on the bed in a state of panic. He was trembling in fear. His body's fat jiggled as he gasped for breath. What's going on? What is going on? The two of them rushed into the room like a whirlwind. What happened? You two still have the nerve to ask me what's going on? Tang Yuan finally came back to his senses. He was filled with righteous indignation as he spat. My fat would have been drawn out and used as a sky lantern if I had waited for you to come back to ask me what's going on. Damn it! Why does everyone say this when they threaten me? Is it fun to light a sky lantern? It's a sin to be a little fat. Fatty Tang roared with indignation. Then, he realized that Hai Chen-feng and Song Shang had disappeared. You're ignoring me. Good, good. Good. Someone come. Prepare a banquet for this great shopkeeper to calm himself down. Get some fat, some tendons, and some steamed buns. Tang Yuan roared. He was startled. His stomach was rumbling with hunger. He couldn't wait to eat a big meal. It seemed that Fatty's fat would be very difficult to reduce. Mei Xuan and Qian Sun Serpent Queen had already gotten along well with Guan Qinghan during their journey from Tiannan to Tianxiang. So, they felt sympathy and admiration for her. Now that the three of them were living together, their attitude was very cordial. The three of them had 3 rooms. Guan Qinghan was in the middle. That night, the three of them chatted very late as usual before going to bed. Mei Xuan and Snake King smiled sweetly when they heard about Jun Moxie's original debauchee deeds. Naturally, the three of them thought that the Jun Moxie of that time was just a disguise. It was hard for him to disguise himself as the #1 debauchee of Tianxiang. How could it be easy to disguise himself as a bad guy? It took a lot of effort to disguise himself as a bad guy. As for Guan Qinghan, her heart was still perturbed after the storm. Now that she suddenly had 2 companions that she could talk to come and live together with her, she felt very comfortable. In the past few days, under the company of the 2 women, she gradually cast aside the shadow of the past and became much more cheerful. She was no longer frowning and worried like before. That night, the 3 women had just separated and returned to their respective rooms. They were about to take off their clothes and go to bed and Mei Xuan suddenly frowned and blew out the oil lamp on the table. she acutely sensed that two powerful auras were heading straight for her. They were really powerful people. In a flash, Qian Sun's Serpent Queen had also sensed it. She knocked on the window. Mei Shuyan shushed her and signaled her not to be impatient. In the darkness, Mei Shuyan's eyes flashed coldly. With me here, I want to see who dares to mess with the Tai Sui. Can the people who are strong in the eyes of ordinary people enter the eyes of Tian Fa Zun? The Snake King was a very smart person. So, she understood what he meant in an instant. So, she restrained her aura, and calmly observed the situation. The night was dark. Two black silhouettes that were darker than the darkness of the night, like bats in the dark night, quietly glided over at high speed and landed almost soundlessly in front of the small courtyard. The two of them looked at the signboard of the small courtyard at the same time with shining eyes. Elegant Fragrance Courtyard. This is the place. The two looked at each other and saw the affirmation in each other's eyes. It seemed as if this worldly family wasn't worth paying attention to in the first place. The figures of the two were as light as feathers. They entered the small courtyard in a flash and arrived in front of the door in another flash. This is the pinnacle of the human's Qing Gong. Mei Shuyan's pupils shrank. She hadn't expected that the people who had come to the Jun family to do such a sneaky thing would be two great master-level experts. In fact, either one of these two men wasn't inferior to the solitary falcon in terms of cultivation. Their faces were covered and their faces couldn't be distinguished. However, Mei Shuyan could clearly tell that these two people were either from the Hermitage or the Great Golden City. Or the illusory Ocean of Blood. Apart from these three places, there was no other place in the world that could send two great master-level experts to do such a sneaky thing. Even if other places had the intention, they wouldn't have the ability to send two great master-level experts at the same time. In the blink of an eye, the two people had arrived at the door. They seemed to be listening to the movements in the room for a while. Then, they finally decided on their target. The room that Mei Shuyan stayed in was facing the direction from which they had come in. Moreover, Mei Shuyan had deliberately made a sound similar to a person's breathing after they had fallen asleep. This made the two great master-level experts decide on this room at the same time. Tang Yuan's confession filled the two of them with incomparable confidence and hope. Who would have thought that the cowardly fatty would design such an intricate death trap? Therefore, the two people didn't have any misgivings and directly sneaked in. They couldn't be blamed for being careless. Everyone in the continent knew that the Jun family had a peerless master. Everyone even said that the peerless master behind the Jun family was an absolutely invincible existence in the world. This kind of news might be able to scare others, but to the illusory Ocean of Blood, it was simply a big joke. Invincible? Who dares to call themselves invincible? Especially in front of the most powerful place in the world, the illusory Ocean of Blood, one of the three holy lands. Even if you were joking, you wouldn't say it like that. The three holy lands would send people to welcome the true experts of the world as long as they reached the bottleneck of the great master level. The name was very sacred. For the peace and future of the continent, there was no reason for any expert to refuse to study the profound Xian techniques and prepare for the war for seizing the heavens. It could be said that in the eyes of the people from the three holy lands, there were no so-called experts in the world. Even if there were one or two experts who couldn't go immediately because of trivial matters in the world, they had already made arrangements to go there in the future. Once they had settled their own matters, they would go to the three holy lands to report, "All the experts of the world are in my hands." As for the so-called invincible master of the Jun family, I really want to see him. The 8 people from the illusory Ocean of Blood who had come here were all powerful top-notch characters in the past. Which one of them wasn't a great master-level expert? How could these so-called experts be worthy of their attention? Thus, the two black-clothed masked men were confident that the powers of the mortal world would be unable to do anything to them. At this moment, it was as if they'd entered their own home, calm and unhurried. They walked boldly up to the door, and they actually knocked lightly and courteously. It must be known that this room was Guan Qinghan's residence. The June family hadn't announced to the world that they had accepted her as their adopted daughter. So, she was nominally the June family's granddaughter-in-law and June Mou's widow. In other words, she was a widow. Knocking on a widow's door in the middle of the night. These two experts from the illusory ocean of blood had actually done such a thing. A delicate and cold voice came from inside. Who is it? The two black-clothed and masked men looked at each other in embarrassment. These two brothers weren't young. They were over 100 or 200 years old. No matter how strong they were, no matter how high their status was. But, this matter didn't sound good at all. However, they could tell that it was Guan Qinghan's voice when they heard it. It was rumored that this beautiful woman's voice had always been cold, therefore, the two of them decided not to reply after they had confirmed their target. They immediately took action, and left as soon as they got their things. Their palms moved slightly, and the two doors silently turned into powder. Then, the two silhouettes flashed in. It was the top-notch lightness technique of a traceless snow. The two of them stood inside the room in an instant. Chapter 488. She was indeed a peerless beauty whose beauty could cause the downfall of a city and a flower. The autumn waters were like divine jade, and her bones were like jade. Her face was like a hibiscus, and her eyebrows were like a willow. She had an indescribably graceful bearing, and an indescribably limitless charm. I'm afraid that you won't be able to find a second woman like her in this world of mortals. Miss Guan, don't be alarmed. We're not bad people. The two masked men felt somewhat restrained when they were faced with such a peerless beauty that could cause the downfall of a nation. They even cupped their hands and apologized. Not bad people. Mei Xuan was so amused by these two men that she almost burst out laughing. You two men barged into a woman's room without an invitation, and you still have the face to say that you're not bad people. Could it be that you're a gentleman? Oh. Since you two esteemed guests claim that you're not bad people, then, why did you come here in such a starry night? You two seem to have knocked on the door a moment ago, but I, as the host, didn't open the door to welcome you. So, you two just barged in like this. This doesn't seem right. With your actions, it's difficult for this little girl to associate you two with good people. Can you two give this little girl an explanation? Mei Xuan said with a smile. The two men's eyes were filled with awkwardness. They hesitated, but were unable to speak. These two men were peerless experts. They had originally planned to take the things they wanted, and then leave. So, this kind of situation shouldn't have occurred. But, who were they facing? They were facing the Lord of Tianfa. The Venerable Mei, who was on an equal footing with the lords of the three holy lands. This was the true peerless expert of the nine heavens. Mei Xuan had restrained her aura, and looked no different from an ordinary woman on the surface. But, she had been in a high position for a long time. She had disdainfully looked down on the world. She had commanded millions of Xian beasts. So, how could she disregard her aura so easily? Even though she was just sitting there calmly without using any Xian qi or even a drop of Xian qi, there was still an invisible aura of a strong cultivator around her. And it was enough to throw these two experts into chaos. That was why the two of them were behaving abnormally. It was like a group of mice passing through an area with a cat. Although the cat didn't show up and didn't call out, the mice would naturally feel their hair stand on end. We are very sorry to disturb you in the middle of the night. However, as long as you hand over the bone-tempering pills, we two brothers will immediately turn around and leave. We won't dare to offend you in the slightest. One of the masked men in black said in a gentle voice, Miss is a refined person. I don't think you would want us two brothers to return empty-handed, right? Hee, bone-tempering pills. Mei Xuan's expression changed. She smiled and tilted her head. She said slowly, what if I don't? Are you going to use force? What if I don't hand it over? This sentence immediately made the two great experts somewhat angry. Little girl, we've already given you enough face. We didn't have the nerve to make a move on you because you're a woman. But, you've stepped on our noses. This pill is related to the future safety of the world. So, it's very troublesome. We don't want to offend you. But, if you insist on not handing it over, for the sake of the common people, then, we have no choice but to offend you. The other masked man sighed in regret. He thought that he was about to make a move on this beautiful jade carving-like young lady. His heart was filled with sorrow and tenderness for the fairer sex. Related to the future safety of the world. For the sake of the common people. That's a very big hat to wear. This humble girl can't afford to bear it. Oh. Offend? Do you intend to offend me? This humble girl wants to ask you two tall and strong men. How do you intend to offend me? Mei Xuan gently smiled. She smiled in a carefree manner. Her smile was like the return of spring. Even the tips of her eyebrows and the corners of her eyes revealed a myriad of amorous feelings. She seemed to be very alluring for a moment. One of the masked men stared blankly. As a supreme martial artist expert, his age was unfathomably old. However, at this moment, his eyes were completely fixated on the scene. It could be seen that Mei Xuan's beauty and charm were unparalleled in this world. Be careful. The other masked man suddenly retreated to the door. He crossed his palms and posed as if he was facing a formidable enemy. You. Who are you? He finally realized that something wasn't right. When Mei Xuan's aura slowly spread out, and a natural charm floated in the air, he finally woke up. He realized that something was wrong and broke out in a cold sweat. What kind of person was she? How could she charm two supreme martial artists with just a few words? What a frightening thing this was. His reminder woke up the other comrade who was still in a daze. Both of them looked at Mei Xuan at the same time, their eyes filled with extreme wariness. Mei Xuan stretched lazily and yawned. She covered her mouth with her jade-like hands and said in a sleepy manner, I don't know if you two are from the Hermitage. Or the Supreme Golden City. Or, the illusory ocean of blood. If you're not from these three places, you wouldn't be so great and noble. You talk about the safety of the world and the future of the human world. As soon as she finished speaking, Mei Xuan straightened her slender waist and opened her eyes wide. Two sharp eyes stared at the two men. Suddenly, the hands and feet of the two supreme martial artists turned cold. Under the gaze of these two pairs of eyes, he actually felt as if his entire body was being seen through from head to toe. Most importantly, when the two pairs of eyes stared at them, the two of them realized that they couldn't move. It wasn't that they couldn't move, but that they didn't dare to move. Because the moment they moved, they would definitely reveal a tiny flaw. A flaw was a flaw, no matter how tiny a flaw was, it was still a flaw. As long as they revealed a flaw, the woman in front of them would be able to make them lie on the ground. The difference in strength between them was too great. The woman in front of them was definitely an expert. In fact, she was an expert among experts. This time, they had really bumped into an iron plate. But this iron plate. Where did it come from? It was too unexpected. You. Who are you? How do you know about the three holy lands? Since you know that we're from the three holy lands, how dare you oppose us? One of the black-clothed masked men's mask had already become wet. It could be seen that at this moment, beads of sweat were flowing out like a river. The three holy lands? Is that so great? Why don't we dare to oppose them? A young girl in green walked in with a sweet smile. She had bright eyes and white teeth. Her black hair was like a cloud, and she looked like a weak willow in the wind. The person who came in was none other than the Qian Sun Serpent Queen. The muscles on the backs of the two men stiffened. This green-clothed woman who had just walked in was at least a high-level great master. She wasn't any weaker than the two of them. In fact, she might even be stronger. It was very rare for such an expert to appear in the secular world. But, they had unexpectedly met two of them in this room tonight. Moreover, one was more terrifying than the other. They had come in the middle of the night, and had fallen into an ambush. It wasn't a big deal if they had fallen into an ambush. But, the ambushers were these two evil women. Moreover, these two brothers couldn't even deal with them. At this moment, the two of them had the same idea, to immediately return to the aristocratic hall and ruthlessly torture that fatty. Then, they would extract all the fat from his body and use it as a sky lantern. This time, they had been cheated by that fatty. However, the two of them were experts of their generation. So, they managed to calm down in the blink of an eye. Their laughter was hoarse and unpleasant to hear. But, it was indeed laughter and not crying. Although this laughter was almost the same as crying, there was basically no difference. Hee hee, you two young ladies, you can't be that Miss Guan Qing Han, right? The black-clothed man on the left smiled and calmed down. His eyes flickered as he said bitterly, we two brothers admit defeat today. But, we don't know which expert has defeated us. You still haven't answered my question. Mei Xuan slightly lowered her eyelids and said slowly, moreover, I don't like to repeat my questions. And, I'm not used to waiting. Since things have come to this, do you really want to shed all pretense of cordiality? Do you really want to go against the three holy lands? Do you want to leave no room for negotiation? The black-clothed man said in a low voice. You're wrong. The two of you can only represent one of the three holy lands. Even if we go against you, it's only your family. It's not the same as going against the three holy lands at the same time. Mei Xuan smiled Langlang. Moreover, I have nothing to fear even if I have to face the three holy lands at the same time. Moreover, I'm saving you some face. I want you to say it yourself. Don't be tactful and waste my painstaking efforts. Mei Xuan said leisurely, there's a symbol on every piece of clothing from the three holy lands. This is really a stupid behavior. I just need to peel off your black skin and I'll know where you come from. I'm not making a move because I'm saving you some face. But, it doesn't mean that I won't make a move. You actually dare to be so stubborn and refuse to say anything? Do you really think that I'll let you go just like that? I don't think I'm that kind. Who are you? The two of them took a step back and looked at Mei Xuan in shock. This young lady was actually so familiar with the three holy lands. But, why couldn't they think of such a person in this world? Humph. Mei Xuan sat motionless. Her face turned cold. She didn't move, but her body automatically emitted a dense white gas. It danced in the air like a spirit snake. With a schwa sound, the sudden appearance of the white gas tore the clothes of one of the black-clothed masked men. With a hua sound, a large piece was torn off, revealing the silver-edged purple robe underneath. At the same time, the masks on the two men's faces suddenly flew up, revealing two wrinkled old faces with grizzled hair and extremely frightened eyes. The two black-clothed masked men tried their best to dodge the white gas. But, they couldn't dodge it at all. So, you're from the illusory ocean of blood. Moreover, you're a silver-robed protector. You're not low-level. Mei Xuan looked at them indifferently, but, you two look very unfamiliar. You weren't chosen to enter the illusory ocean of blood from the secular world, right? Are you the natives of the illusory ocean of blood? You. The two of them were dripping with sweat. Chapter 489. Today's first chapter. I was busy with some matters, so I couldn't write smoothly. I'm sorry I'm late. Wait for the second chapter. Old Lord, he. The black-clothed man blurted out under the pressure of her imposing aura. But then, he realized that he would be surrendering if he opened his mouth. So, he quickly shut his mouth. This was the so-called deceiving one's ears while stealing a bell. Old Lord. It seems that Huyen Tian Feng has retired behind the scenes. So, the current lord is his son? Mei Shuiyan looked at them cynically. Huyan Ao Bo, right? I really look down on your 3 holy lands. Now, you leave everything good to your son. You've completely forgotten the old tradition of abdicating your position. The 3 holy lands have always been dominated by the capable. But, your illusory ocean of blood is actually hereditary? That bastard Huyan Ao Bo can become the lord of the illusory ocean of blood? I'm very surprised. Humph. Which of the 3 holy lands isn't hereditary? You little girl, how dare you speak such nonsense and insult our lord? You're the enemy of the entire illusory ocean of blood. You're very courageous. Our illusory ocean of blood won't let this matter rest. I can ask the Lord to forgive you if you apologize and hand over the bone-tempering pills. The old man on the left had an angry look on his face. He pointed his halberd and shouted. This old man's face was full of anger. But, his heart was full of cowardice. You 2 old men probably haven't been in the Jianghu, right? The corners of Mei Shuiyan's mouth curled up slightly, revealing a cruel, cold smile. If there really is a supreme martial artist who fought hard in the Jianghu, which one of them isn't a veteran of hundreds of battles? How could they remain calm in the face of any unexpected changes? Look at you 2. It's obvious that you're great master experts that were raised by the illusory ocean of blood. You have the cultivation of a great master, but you don't have the elegance of a great master. You don't even have the experience of a real great master. Trash like you can't even compare to the outstanding Shen Xian of the Jianghu. Yet, you dare to strut around in front of me? And, you even intend to coerce me. You want to get the bone-tempering pills from me? You guys have really grown up. Mei Shuiyan's tone became more and more disdainful. Hearing such undisguised insults, the 2 old men from the illusory ocean of blood roared in anger. Then, they suddenly dodged each other, and soared into the air at the same time. Then, their 4 palms struck out with a sharp and fierce force. Suddenly, their palms transformed into tens of thousands of phantoms. Their momentum was extremely frightening. Mei Shuiyan snorted. She spread her arms and shouted, "Arrogance! You are asking for humiliation. Heaven and earth cage." An unprecedentedly powerful invisible force instantly formed a special space that was completely isolated from the normal space. The old man on the left immediately maintained his jumping posture, unable to move at all. Seeing this, the other old man turned pale with fright. He let out a shrill cry, and with a few bangs, Mei Shuiyan had already exchanged 3 palm strikes with him. Only 3 palm strikes. Mei Shuiyan's expression remained unchanged. She gently withdrew her palm, her eyes cold. The chair under her body made a light cracking sound, but there was no other movement. However, the old man wasn't so lucky. His body rolled backwards like a ball. Then, he suddenly turned around, and stabilized his unbalanced body. Then, he suddenly opened his mouth, and an arrow of blood sprayed towards the Qian Sun Serpent Queen's face. However, his body didn't stop at the same time, and he continued to run away. It was impossible to do anything. It was better to leave as soon as possible. The changes in this place were too shocking. So, it was better to inform old Huang and the young lord as soon as possible. Who would have thought that the tiny Jun family, which they thought they could easily capture, would actually have such a world-shaking expert hidden in their midst? Therefore, he made a prompt decision to run away. Life and death were decided in a fight between experts. It was only a short exchange, but the outcome had already been decided. Just during those few strikes from before, the attacks of the peerlessly beautiful woman before him were truly swift and fierce like lightning, and their might was matchless. With a raise of her hand, she'd already caused him to suffer internal injuries, and his internal organs were damaged. However, the old man still possessed the cultivation of a great master. So, he was able to hold back the blood, and didn't spit it out. Then, he turned it into a sharp weapon to attack the Snake King. This kind of adaptability could be said to be extraordinary. But, it was a pity that his opponent was the Snake King of the Tianfa forest. The king of poisons who was famous for his sinister and ruthless methods. So, how could he be deceived by his little tricks? The Snake King didn't want to get involved in the battle led by Mei Shuyan. But, that old man had taken the initiative to provoke him. So, he couldn't say anything. He raised his head, and an arrow of blood flew past his face. Then, he struck out with his palms, and turned his body in the air. Then, he kicked the old man's calves with the force of 1,000 caddies. These 2 kicks came very suddenly, and seemed to come from impossible places. It was impossible to guard against them. The old man's legs would have been crippled if these kicks had landed. Even if he had the cultivation of a great master, he wouldn't be an exception. The old man became even more frightened when he saw the Snake King's sharp attacks. But, he didn't panic. He slashed his palms downwards, and cut towards the Snake King's ankles. At the same time, his feet changed directions, and his legs turned into a blur. Then, he rushed out of the door. As long as the beautiful woman behind him didn't make a move, he was confident that he could escape. The Snake King snorted coldly, and raised his leg. Not only did he avoid the old man's palms, but he also kicked towards his chest. His other leg didn't fall to the ground, and the tip of his foot was straight towards the old man's knee. The positions of these 2 attacks were extremely cunning. With the old man's strength, he could only avoid one of them. If he was hit in the knee, he would inevitably be crippled for life. But if he was hit in the chest, his life would be in danger. Both of them were at the level of a great master. So, there shouldn't be such a big difference between them. But, the old man had fought with Mei Shuyan. So, his vitality was greatly damaged, and his internal injuries were severe. So, he had lost at least 30% of his combat power. More importantly, the 3 Holy Lands had trained these experts behind closed doors. When it came to the experience of life and death battles, they couldn't compare to the great masters of the pugilistic world. Compared to the beast kings of Tianfa, they weren't on the same level. So, he was at an absolute disadvantage in the first exchange. Forget it, let him go, Mei Shuyan Lengleng snorted and said, a mere illusory ocean of blood is nothing in my eyes. Let him go back and report the news. What's the big deal? If I kill him on the spot, he'll think that I'm afraid of the illusory ocean of blood's revenge. The Snake King heard this, and his waist shrank in the air. He quickly withdrew his feet that were about to hit the target. The old man's feet almost brushed past his toes, and he flew out of the wall. But, he spat out a mouthful of blood in midair. His Xian Qi had been circulating at a rapid speed, and it had overloaded his body. This had caused his internal injuries to worsen. Especially the feeling in his heart. It had almost made him want to die here, and end all his troubles. What a shame. He had used almost all his strength, and he had risked his life. But, in the end, he had to be let go to escape. However, Mei Shuyan had decided to let him go. But, the other person might not. Just as the old man was about to jump over the wall, a brilliant sword light suddenly appeared in midair. This sword light was as bright as lightning in the sky. The speed of this sword light was as fast as a thunderbolt. It struck midair. That old man was in a state where he could neither reach the sky nor the ground. He thought that he had escaped with his life. His heart rejoiced, and his mind couldn't help but relax a little. Moreover, he had just suffered serious internal injuries. His internal organs were damaged, and his vitality was greatly damaged. Just as he was about to step over the wall, his breath of qi had almost dissipated, and he hadn't been able to summon his strength. This was his weakest moment. The timing of this sword light was extremely coincidental, so wonderful that it was at the pinnacle of perfection. His grasp of timing was already at the point of perfection. One had to know that he was facing a supreme-level expert. Even a top-notch assassin might not be able to grasp this fleeting opportunity. The sword light filled the sky, and the killing move was deadly. The old man's hair and beard were all green, and his face showed extreme shock, surprise, despair, and fear. But, just as he opened his mouth, and before he could make a sound, everything was over. That sharp sword that had suddenly appeared in the sky had directly chopped down from his right shoulder. The sword light didn't stop, and continued to descend, like a knife cutting through tofu. With a shwa sound, it flashed out from under his left rib. A bright light flashed in the sky, and a deep sword cry sounded like a dragon's roar. Like a dragon flying into the sea, it disappeared without a trace. Godly sword, blood of yellow flame. A young man in white, as if riding the wind, appeared in front of Mei Shuyan's door. This position was at least 6 zhang away from the old man in black who had been attacked. The black-robed old man's body continued to charge forward, but his once clear eyes had already turned into that of a dead fish. While flying, the 2 shoulders of the upper body supporting the head and one arm suddenly separated from the lower body. The upper body first hit the wall, and then the lower body also hit the wall with a loud bang. Blood rained down from the sky. The dust had settled. Jun Moxie was dressed in white, and his face was gentle. He didn't even turn his head, and walked into the room leisurely. He smiled and said, "I'm really sorry, I didn't protect you well, and caused the 2 ladies to be frightened. If one didn't know, they would have thought that this Jun Dashao was innocent." Jun Dashao had been busy refining pills and practicing martial arts for the past few days, and he was really busy from day to night. He didn't know if it was because of his skills, or because he was lucky, but he had finally succeeded in refining a batch of vitality linkage pills. But he was also very tired. He couldn't help but come out to take a breath of fresh air, and just happened to see the 2 people rushing towards Guan Qinghan's courtyard like lightning. It seemed that his plan had worked. Jun Dashao couldn't help but feel proud, but then he thought, how is Tang Yuan? Could it be? With that thought, he hurried over. Chapter 490. Mei Shuyan didn't put the people from the illusory blood sea in her eyes, but Jun Moxie knew that he didn't have the ability to do so. Now that he had such a great opportunity, he naturally wouldn't let them go. If he really let them go, it would definitely expose the true strength of his side. Then, how would he be able to continue tricking people? Letting the enemy die in ignorance and confusion was the best way to play dirty, wasn't it? It was also the most satisfying way to play dirty. How can you be so hypocritical? Qian Sun Serpent Queen glared at him. Your sword was really fast. In my opinion, it could be ranked in the top 3 in terms of speed. Mei Shuyan slowly raised her eyelids and looked at him. But you shouldn't have killed him. You really shouldn't have. Mei Shuyan was deeply shocked by the sharpness of the sword. She was a little shocked. The one who had unleashed such a sword was actually Jun Moxie. That sword had only appeared for a moment, but it was earth-shattering. The light of the sword had disappeared, and the person was dead. But, the magnificence of that sword was still flashing in the hearts of the 2 women. Although he didn't show it, the way Snake King looked at Jun Moxie was different. Because she knew that she wouldn't have been able to dodge that attack if she had been in that man's place. This sword was truly a stroke of genius. Mei Shuyan had faced many enemies in her life. How could there be anyone below the great master level? But, she had to admit that Jun Moxie's sword was one of the best among all the experts she had seen. Why shouldn't I? Should I welcome him from afar if he invaded my Jun residence in the middle of the night? How is that reasonable? Jun Moxie snorted and raised his eyebrows. I will kill those who offend me. On this point, there was no room for accommodation. It will never exist. Even this. He pointed at the other expert from the illusory ocean of blood who was still trapped in the world cage. I have no intention of letting him go. But they are still people from the illusory ocean of blood. Mei Shuiyan stared straight at Jun Moxie's face. The illusory blood sea is an indispensable force in the war for seizing the heavens. With this sword of yours, there's no turning back. Room for maneuver. It was gone a long time ago. As for the war for seizing the heavens, was it just based on these people? Ha! Aren't you joking? What use do they have? Jun Moxie laughed wildly. I thought that the so-called experts of the three holy lands were amazing when I heard you talk about them. But, now that I have seen them with my own eyes, it seems that hearing about them is not as good as seeing them in person. I believe that even Olding would be much stronger than these two supreme beings. These two people, other than possessing the profound strength of a supreme martial artist, were simply two rookies. If it's a fair fight, I'll definitely die to Olding within 100 moves. I even have the strength to fight him head-on. As expected, you've been hiding on the side for a long time. Mei Shuiyan snorted coldly. Her expression was ice-cold. You used us to block a strong enemy for you. This must feel very good, right? Miss Mei, where did you get this idea from? Jun Moxie had an innocent look on his face. I had been concentrating on practicing my martial arts. I wanted to increase my strength in preparation for a rainy day. So, I came here just now. And, I happened to see these two sneaky fellows trying to do something wrong. But, I thought that you two are peerless experts, and that it would be disrespectful to you two if I rashly intervened. Moreover, I only have the strength of a mere Tian Xian. It's not enough to contend against the legendary experts of the Holy Lands. So, I hid on the side, and waited to take advantage of them. But, who would have thought that their strength would be so sloppy? May I ask, what's wrong with this? As for using you two, I'm being wronged to death. How could I have such a thought? This young master has always been upright, chivalrous, and magnanimous. How could I do such a thing? Miss Mei, you're wronging me to death. This is like the frost in June. Mei Shuiyan looked at him for a long time. Then, she finally sighed. Jun Moxie, Jun Dashao, I've been roaming the Jianghu for a long time. But, you're the most thick-skinned person I've ever seen. You're overpraising me. Miss Mei is overpraising me. Jun Moxie didn't feel embarrassed in the slightest. Instead, he sat down with a clear conscience. Why did they ask me for the bone-tempering pills if you don't admit that you've planned this from the beginning? Mei Shuiyan looked at Jun Dashao's face as if it was a matter of course. So, she became very angry. So, she coldly said, moreover, how could you have arrived at such a coincidental time if you hadn't planned this? Give me a reasonable explanation. This is a gargantuan injustice. I've been urging my master to make the best use of his time to refine the pills for you. But, it's all for your sake. I've been begging and urging him to shamelessly stick to him. And, I've finally managed to concoct some good pills for you. My master had just given them to me. So, I had rushed over immediately. But, I hadn't expected that you would say that it was a conspiracy. I'm being wronged to death. The expression on Jun Moxie's face was filled with emotions. In fact, it was as if Marshal Yu had been pushed into the storm pavilion. That kind of hidden bitterness, that kind of grievance, and that kind of depression of being wronged but being unable to defend oneself. It was vivid and lifelike. It had come from the bottom of his heart. In fact, it had come from his instinct. Is this true? Mei Shuiyan blinked her eyes. She carefully looked at his expression. It didn't seem like he was faking it. So, she couldn't help but feel a little guilty, I've wronged you this time. What do you mean by wronged? You've wronged me in the first place. Jun Moxie heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. He became more and more confident. It's not that I want to criticize the two of you. You two sisters have been in the pugilistic world for a long time. It's not a problem for you to be a little suspicious. But, you still have to distinguish between outsiders and your own people. I'm sincere and full of enthusiasm, but, you've really hurt my heart." His fingers were trembling. His whole body was trembling. His face was also a little red. His eyes were wide open. It was obvious that he was very hurt. But, in fact, he was trying to muddle through and was secretly laughing, cough cough. Mei Shuiyan was very embarrassed. She forced a few coughs. She couldn't think of an excuse. So, she hurriedly gave a look to signal Qian Sun's Serpent Queen to leave first. Qian Sun understood. So, she quietly left. She happened to see Guan Qinghan, who had been startled awake. So, she chattered on the way to Guan Qinghan's room, "Young Master Jun, cough cough, you've worked hard." Mei Shuiyan was a Tianfa martial artist. When had she ever apologized to anyone in her life? Even with her self-cultivation, her face had turned red for the first time. This was the first time she had felt at a loss for what to do. She had even used honorifics. Seeing Jun Moxie looking like a little wife who had been wronged, Mei Shuiyan hesitated for a while. Then, she remembered that he was holding a divine pill in his hand. So, she gritted her teeth and said, "Young Master Jun, that..." "Humph." Jun Moxie twisted his waist and turned his head away. He looked even more like a little wife who had been wronged. "Young Master Jun, don't be angry," Mei Shuiyan cautiously said. She didn't know why this peerless expert, Mei Shuiyan, had faintly felt a little guilty in the face of Jun Moxie's anger. Mei Shuiyan was also startled when she had said these words. "What's wrong with me?" "Humph." Jun Dashao imitated Duga Xiaoyi, and pouted. But, he suddenly thought that this wasn't very manly. So, he sighed and said, "Forget it. We're just acquaintances. So, it's normal for you to be a little suspicious. Besides, you didn't mean it. So, I forgive you." Mei Shuiyan finally heaved a sigh of relief. She still had some doubts in her heart. But, she didn't want to say them out loud. For example, those two didn't look for you for the bone-tempering pills. Why did they come to this woman's room to look for the bone-tempering pills? What's the explanation for this? But, she suppressed these doubts in her stomach when she saw Jun Moxie's appearance. "I'll just take it that I'm enduring this humiliation for the sake of my mission." "That. I don't know about those pills." Jun Moxie pursed his lips, and looked at that unlucky expert from the illusory ocean of blood. He then signaled to him that, the law must not be passed to 6 ears. This unlucky child's face was filled with panic. Mei Shuiyan frowned. She then grabbed that man, and threw him out. Jun Moxie had clearly seen that Mei Shuiyan had only brushed her palm lightly when she had grabbed him. But, she had destroyed his dantian first. Then, she had seized the opportunity to attack his 5 internal organs. Then, she had sent a strong energy to attack his head. Presumably, this person's head was already in a mess. Then, she had grabbed him and thrown him out. He had only heard a puff sound, and then he had become silent. She had vented her anger at Jun Moxie on that unlucky bastard. That guy hadn't even had the time to groan before he had turned into a corpse. 2 great master-level experts hadn't even been able to display their best skills. Instead, they had been silently executed. It had to be said that these 2 men had very bad luck. If they hadn't arrived at the Jun family's residence as their first stop, then they would have been able to set off a storm in Jianghu with their current strength. But, they had died in such a sullen manner. Moreover, they had died in such an inexplicable manner. In fact, they hadn't been able to figure out what had happened even after they had died. How sad. So nimble. Jun Moxie secretly gave a thumbs up. "I feel relieved since you've taken the initiative to destroy the evidence. I was most afraid that you would have caught me and interrogated me. And, you would have said that the bone-tempering pills had been confessed by Tang Yuan. Then, you would have been done for. Wouldn't you have come to settle accounts with this young master? I've made such a great expert apologize to me. Ah! This pill. A small jade bottle silently appeared in June Moxie's hand. His face was full of pain. This is the result of my third attempt. I would have been able to produce 100 pills in a single furnace for 10 years. But, this vitality linkage pill has only produced 6 pills after exhausting me to the point of exhaustion. This is too much. What pill is this? What are its effects? How much does it increase your strength? Mei Xuyan's eyes lit up. She was trying her best to restrain her calmness. However, her tone had become somewhat nervous. This is related to the future of the Tianfa forest. This is called the vitality linkage pill. It doesn't increase your strength. June Moxie's complexion turned slightly red as he replied in a somewhat ashamed manner. It doesn't increase your strength? Then. Mei Xuyan stared blankly for a moment. The effect of this pill is a little special. It can only increase the speed of the circulation of your strength in your meridians. In other words, the circulation speed of your Xian Qi or strength will increase by 3 times after taking this pill. June Moxie explained, it can only increase the speed of your movements. What? It can increase the speed of your movements? Mei Xuyan's eyes lit up. She wasn't like June Moxie, who didn't know what was good for her. So, she was thoroughly shocked. Chapter 491. She molested me, she has a lot of strength, molesting me. So be it. But, if I do it to her, isn't that just asking for abuse? They are not on the same level. Oh God, oh Earth, what should I do? Just as he was complaining in his heart, a loud bang sounded. Mei Xuyan rushed out with a red face and a little bit of anger, craziness, and embarrassment. She was like a tornado, an angry tornado. Eh? What did you say? You. Why did you molest me? June Moxie took the initiative and asked. I molested you. Mei Xuyan's eyes darkened, and she raised her hand, wanting to hit him. What are you saying? You're a man and I'm a woman, I molested you. Where did this come from? Saying this, don't you have any shame? June Moxie turned over, his butt was still on the ground, and he hadn't stood up yet. He smiled and said, I didn't mean it, I said something wrong. You. What? How about, I take responsibility. I'm willing to take responsibility, to the end. You. Get out of my sight. Mei Xuyan was angry, amused, and embarrassed at the same time. Her face was burning, and she wanted to beat him up, but for some reason, looking at his incomparably lazy and scoundrel appearance, her heart softened, and she didn't do anything. She just stomped her feet and roared. June Moxie felt as if he had been pardoned, and he didn't dare to say anything else. He scrambled up, covered his head, and ran away like a rat, and disappeared without a trace. I've finally escaped, but why didn't she hit me? Could it be that she also likes this young master? Mei Xuyan stomped her feet, and covered her face. What's going on? What's wrong with me? Why did I let him go like this? That's not like me at all, big sister. What's wrong with you? Did this kid offend you? The Snake King's speed was extremely fast. She scuttled out with a whooshing sound. However, she suddenly cried out in alarm as soon as she finished speaking, Ah! Big sister, you. What happened to you? Because Snake King suddenly found that his elder sister was like a little woman in love, covering her face and stamping her feet, not knowing what to do. He was petrified. Heavens, how many years has it been? Who has ever seen Big Sister act like this? Could it be that brat actually dared to molest Big Sister? But, wasn't he a little too daring? This was something that no one in the entire Tianfa forest dared to do. No one even dared to think about it. But, wasn't this too unbelievable? With a whoosh sound, Mei Shuian went back to her room with her hands covering her face. It was so embarrassing. Guan Qinghan just came out at this time. She saw Qian Sun's serpent queen standing in the courtyard with her mouth wide open and a strange expression. She couldn't help but ask with concern, what happened just now? What happened to big sister Mei? No. Nothing, nothing. Snake King said a little hurriedly. After a while, he couldn't help but say again, it's really nothing. He stamped his feet and said, I'll go and see big sister. He actually ran away as if he was escaping. She didn't forget the relationship between Guan Qinghan and Jun Moxie. She didn't dare to speak carelessly. Moreover, her speculation might not be accurate. How could Jun Moxie have such a great ability? But big sister's behavior was too abnormal at that time. It was obvious that she had been. No, I have to confirm it. If it was really that, how could I let that brat Jun Moxie take advantage of her? Guan Qinghan furrowed her brows, her stomach full of suspicions. What exactly happened? Why do I feel that the atmosphere is so strange? She had come out late. So, she hadn't seen Mei Shuian. Naturally, she hadn't seen Jun Moxie either. But, she had heard the sound. Especially Mei Shuian's get lost sound. So, it would be strange if she hadn't heard it. It seems that Imo Xia has somehow offended her. I have to talk to Imo Xia tomorrow. He's a guest after all. I have to entertain him properly. Guan Qinghan frowned and went back to her room. Imo Xia's temper is too violent. It would be good if he could change it. The corpses and traces in the courtyard had been cleaned up by the guards in a short while. Everything was quiet, so satisfying, so fragrant. That was really soft, really so satisfying. Jun Moxie was still reminiscing about the feeling he had just had when he arrived at the aristocratic hall. The process had been very thrilling. But Jun Dashao believed that it was worth it. It was worth it. It was really refreshing. Not to mention the sweetness in his mouth. Even the sweetest honey in the world would turn into swill when compared to it. That feeling was simply lingering in his mind for 3 days. There was also the soft and silky touch, the plump and supple feeling, that indescribable, really indescribable, wonderful feeling that couldn't be described with words. In short, it could be summed up in one sentence, the best. Jun Moxie and Jun Dashao had been in a daze the entire way. They had arrived at the aristocratic hall in a daze, as if they were sleepwalking. Fortunately, no one was plotting against him at this time. Otherwise, Jun Moxie would have been most vulnerable to being killed. This was probably the moment when the hitman's vigilance was at its lowest in both of his lives. In fact, it could be said that he hadn't been vigilant at all. Dashao had made a vow in his heart along the way. He had made a vow to himself. No matter what, no matter what, no matter what. I want. 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 I want her to be my wife. I don't care what her identity is. I don't care how high her Xian Qi is, I don't care about her. In short, I must marry her as my wife no matter what. I don't need a specific reason. I don't need a reason. Besides, she still needs my help. Humph. This young master will blackmail her from now on. I don't care how shameless I am. I'll go all out. I used to despise this world's backward feudal system. But, it seems that this world is still very attractive. At least in this world, it's normal for men, especially the children of influential families, to have 3 wives and 4 concubines. It's a matter of course. Jun Moxie suddenly discovered a very serious problem as he thought about it. Moreover, there was a very big reason behind it. Among the few close female friends he had, Dugu Xiao-yi was unruly and willful. Moreover, she was too young and didn't know much about the world. Obviously, she wasn't a good candidate to be a wife. As for Guan Qinghan, with her status and cold personality, she didn't seem to be suitable to be a wife in charge of the harem. No matter how he thought about it, Mei Shuiyan, who was graceful and magnanimous, had peerless elegance and outstanding ability, was the best choice for a wife. Okay, you're the one. Beauty, don't even think of running away. My dearest wife. Jun Moxie snapped his fingers, and floated into the aristocratic hall. When he saw Tang Yuan stuffing himself with food, he immediately relaxed his heart that had been hanging in midair. He asked a few simple questions. He wanted to show some concern. But, he saw Tang Yuan's tearful eyes. Then, he pulled up his robe to show him the place where he was being abused. So, Jun Moxie immediately ran away. What's the difference between that and looking at a piece of fat pork? Moreover, it's a living piece of fat. It's simply disgusting. Fatty Tang felt that he had been framed. And, the main culprit was obviously Jun Moxie and Jun Dashao. He had wanted to tell the whole story. Then, he would complain with tears of blood and tears. That way, he would get the most benefits. At the very least, he would get a few million taels of silver to make up for his fragile heart. But, he hadn't expected that Jun Moxie would disappear without a trace before he could finish his action. He only left behind a few words. Fatty, I've been in a good mood for half a year. But, your fat belly has ruined it. Your share for this month will be reduced by 10%. Fatty was stunned. He caressed his belly, which was dangling on the ground, and remained silent for a long time. Is my belly really that powerful? Suddenly, he thought of something. He let out a miserable howl like a pig being slaughtered. I'm the victim. How can I still have my share reduced? Where's the justice in this? 10% is at least 1,000,000 taels of silver. Heavens! Earth! Let me die. The experts of the illusory ocean of blood from the Golden East City's Huang family slept soundly for the whole night. From their point of view, it would be enough if only one of the 8 of them went. What's more, sending 2 of them at once. It would be like pinching a snail with 3 fingers. It would be a piece of cake. It would be 10,000% foolproof. Unfortunately, nothing was absolute in this world. Even if it was foolproof, there would still be a mistake. This was the 10,000th and first time. When everyone woke up, they were ready to listen to the good news. But, after asking around, they all said that the 2 people hadn't returned. They hadn't returned for the whole night. This was very unexpected. However, they didn't take it to heart. Perhaps the bone-tempering pills are hidden in a distant place. So, it might take some time to retrieve them. After all, those 2 were genuine revered martial artist-level experts. Even if they ran into a formidable enemy, couldn't they run away even if they couldn't beat them? Even if those 2 weren't strong enough, it wouldn't be a problem for one of them to escape. And, even if both of them couldn't escape, was that even possible? Who in this world has that kind of strength? It was a ridiculous question. Therefore, no one was worried. They waited until the afternoon. But, there was still no movement. In fact, it seemed as if those 2 had completely melted into the air. And, everyone started to panic. Old Huang, I'm afraid that the situation isn't good. The illusory ocean of blood's young lord, Huyen Shao frowned. He gently tapped his finger on the table beside him and said, there's no reason why old 5 and old 6 haven't returned yet. I'm afraid that they've encountered an irresistible situation. Could it be that, the aristocratic hall has such strength behind it? Even the experts of the illusory ocean of blood aren't their match? Old Huang frowned, and his white eyebrows slightly trembled. He had a gloomy expression on his face for a long time before he said, we are very clear about the strength of the aristocratic hall. They only have Meng Hong Chen's disciple, and that drunkard. Both of them are only at the Sky Xian level. So, there's nothing to worry about. Apart from that, there aren't any particularly strong people in the aristocratic hall. So, it wouldn't be in the aristocratic hall if those two were to encounter a strong enemy. Could it be the three great families? Hu Yanxiao frowned. No. The Tianxiang Empire's military strength is at the top of the continent. But, it's one of the weakest in the entire continent when it comes to Xian experts. It's difficult to find a few experts who are as strong as Xin Xian in the entire empire. So, there's no need to talk about stronger existences. Old Huang's eyebrows knitted together in a gloomy manner. His eyes emitted a sinister glint as he hatefully said, I'm afraid that it's the Jun family if there's an unexpected powerhouse. And, it can only be the Jun family. The Jun family? That family has been bullied by the Silver Blizzard City to the point where they can't even stand up. How could they have such a background? Isn't this too unimaginable? Hu Yanxiao was somewhat disapproving. Young lord, you mustn't forget the news that we had received some time ago. It said that the mysterious black-clothed and masked man who had appeared in the southern Heaven City was invincible. This old man doesn't think that he's invincible. But, he should be at least as strong as Yunbi Chen. The fifth brother and the sixth brother are also at the great master level. But, they've been cultivating behind closed doors. So, there's a big gap between them and a genuine great master level expert. They don't have much experience in fighting against their enemies. So, it's reasonable that they would have fallen into a trap if they had been caught off guard. Old Huang muttered in a low voice, it seems that I've underestimated him. What should we do if the Jun family has such a great expert lying in wait? Hu Yanxiao tightly wrinkled his brows. The most important thing is that this mysterious bone-tempering pill must have been refined by this expert. My father had exhorted us to do everything we could to make him join our illusory ocean of blood if such a person truly exists. Moreover, we must get along well with him even if we can't. Then, we must make plans for the future. So, we mustn't become enemies with him. And, we mustn't let the Hermitage and the Great Golden City take advantage of us. Won't our plans come to nothing if we come into conflict with him? Hu Yanxiao asked with a headache. It doesn't matter what kind of expert he is. But, our illusory ocean of blood mustn't suffer such a loss in vain. Old Huang smiled sinisterly. He then slowly continued, this old man will personally go to the Jun family if they haven't returned by midnight. And, I'll see, what kind of dragon's pool or tiger's den is. And, what kind of matchless expert is he? Invincible in the world? Do you think it's so easy to bear such a title? He. Old Huang, you must be extremely cautious. But, you mustn't put him to death even if you find him. After all, this bone-tempering pill. Hu Yanxiao hastily spoke up. He wasn't worried that Old Huang would meet with any mishap. After all, Old Huang's strength was enough to stand firmly in the top 10 of the illusory ocean of blood. In fact, it could be said that he was an invincible expert in this world. Chapter 492. The Tianxiang city towered in the darkness of the night like an ancient beast that had been dormant for an unknown period of time. Two silhouettes staggered towards the city from afar. When they saw the pitch-black city wall, they let out a long sigh of relief at the same time. Their minds relaxed, and they all fell to the ground in exhaustion. These two men were Mu Shuetong and Han Yanmeng. They had fought a bloody battle, and had luckily escaped with their lives. The two of them had been fleeing for thousands of miles, and had suffered a lot. Especially in the past month, the Silver Blizzard City's Shao family's experts had repeatedly ambushed and obstructed them. They were constantly on tenterhooks. Mu Shuetong was a bit better off. After all, he was a veteran of the Jianghu. Moreover, his cultivation was at the same level as Tian Xian. However, the Silver Blizzard City's little princess, Han Yanmeng, was in a miserable state. She had been the pride of the Silver Blizzard City since she was a child. Her life had been smooth sailing. So, she had never experienced such a bumpy journey. Moreover, she had faced the possibility of being hunted down at any time. Moreover, she was only a gold xian. So, it was hard to tell how many times she would have died if Mu Shuetong hadn't been by her side. The fact that the two of them had been able to arrive at Tianxiang by a fluke was all thanks to Mu Shuetong's rich experience in the Jianghu. Mu Shuetong had repeatedly disguised himself, and had even hardened his heart. He had stung Han Yen Meng's beautiful face with a big yellow bee, and hadn't reduced the swelling. Then, he had smeared a special liquid on their skin, and had turned their skin dark. The two of them had been holding the sound-changing pill in their mouths the entire time. They hadn't taken it out even when they were sure that they were alone. However, they hadn't dared to take it out for fear of being discovered by the enemy. They had been extremely cautious along the way. Even so, they had almost been discovered several times. In fact, they had even been besieged by several enemies. Fortunately, they had been far from the Silver Blizzard City at that time. So, they hadn't encountered many experts. So, Mu Shuetong had fought his way out. However, this had also exposed their whereabouts. Therefore, the Xiao family had sealed off the road leading to the Tianxiang city. The two of them didn't know how many times they had passed through the city. But, they had finally arrived at this place. The two of them finally heaved a sigh of relief. However, Mu Shuetong hadn't forgotten that there was still the magnificent jewel hall in the Tianxiang city. There were also people from the Xiao clan there. It was even possible that the Xiao clan had complete control over that place, but they still didn't dare to be careless. The moment they were closest to success was often the most dangerous moment. At least before meeting Jun Wui or Jun Moxie, he couldn't afford to be careless. The slightest bit of carelessness could be followed by eternal damnation. Moreover, the entire Silver City might be consigned to eternal damnation. The Xiao family had rebelled and plotted in the dark all these years. Their strength had obviously reached a considerable level. Thinking about it, Mu Shuetong felt exceptionally sorrowful. Over the years, under the teachings of the Han family had always been tolerant towards the Xiao family. They even took great care of the Xiao family and sympathized with them. This was why the Xiao family was so powerful today. Previously, everyone had said that the Xiao family was diligent and conscientious, shouldering everything on their shoulders. As expected of the Han family's staunch ally. But now, Mu Shuetong smiled bitterly. The Silver Blizzard City was such a colossus, but under the control of the Xiao family, the true owner of the city, the Han family, had become completely deaf and blind. In the vast continent, every major city had a secret station of the Silver Blizzard City. The news network could reach the Silver Blizzard City from any place, but he didn't dare to use any of them. This was because the intelligence center was under the control of the Xiao family. The periphery of the Silver Blizzard City was under the control of the Xiao family. Such a huge information network had unexpectedly become a stumbling block that hindered his actions. Not only could he not obtain any help, but he also had to worry about his whereabouts being discovered by the Xiao family. After all, he was now shouldering the rise and fall of the Silver Blizzard City. He couldn't afford to be careless. Mu Shuetong slowly adjusted his breathing, and forced himself to stand up. Then, he took out 2 biscuits from his bosom, and gave one to Han Yen Meng. He then said in a gentle voice, "Meng, eat something, and recuperate your strength. Then, we'll find a way to enter the city to find Jun Wui and Jun Moxie." Han Yen Meng's small face was now dark and glossy. She didn't look as beautiful and lovely as before. In fact, it was easy to see that she had lost a lot of weight. This journey of escape had made this naive and adorable little girl thoroughly understand the sinister nature of the human heart. She had never expected that the elders who had always been kind and amiable to her would do so many despicable things behind her back. They were willing to put her to death at all costs. Suddenly, the little girl felt as if her view of life had been completely overturned. The heavy burden on her body and mind along the way was so heavy that she could barely breathe. She took the biscuit from Mu Shuetong in a daze, and took a bite of it. However, her teeth almost fell off, and her heart ached as she couldn't help but shed tears. Mu Shuetong sighed, and looked at her with pity. This little princess of the Silver Blizzard City had always been pampered and pampered since childhood. How could she have ever suffered like this? The root of all this was because of the Xiao family, that damned traitorous family. Even if it was hard to swallow, I still have to eat it, I have to eat it all. Only by eating this unpalatable biscuit will I have the strength to persevere. After eating the biscuit, they rested for a moment, and felt that they had regained a lot of strength. At the very least, they were able to hurry on with their journey. So, they slowly stood up. The two men looked at the distant Tianxiang city with a complicated look in their eyes. Who would have thought that the dignified Silver Blizzard City would place all its hopes on the Jun family when the Silver Blizzard City had brought harm upon them? Isn't this a bit too ridiculous? Even Mu Shuetong would have found this matter funny if it had been said before, but now it had become a fact. This was the only life-saving straw that the two of them could hold on to. Let's go. The two silhouettes soared into the sky, and disappeared into the darkness of the night. It was almost midnight. Mei Xueyan rested her chin in her hands, and sat alone under a dim oil lamp. She was almost unconsciously looking at the flickering flame of the lamp, and was lost in thought. For many years, the Venerable Mei had always been a powerful figure, and had always been a world-shaking figure. But, she had never been as distracted as she was right now. Jun Moxie's sudden kiss during the day had been like a stone falling into her tranquil heart lake. Her heart had always been as tranquil as water, but now it had been flooded with endless waves. A small stone had fallen from the middle of the lake, and the ripples had gradually spread to the entire surface of the lake, and there was no sign of it stopping. The Snake King had asked her a few questions out of concern, but Mei Xueyan had ignored him. Her face had turned ugly, and the Snake King had run away to talk to Guan Qinghan. After all, the oppressive atmosphere of the boss's appearance was enough to crush a person to death. If the boss were to get angry, then it would be no small matter, and he would have to stay away from her. I can't let the black dog get the food, and the white dog get the disaster. Bah, what kind of metaphor is this? Anyway, staying here is certainly not as comfortable as listening to Guan Qinghan talk about Jun Moxie's past debauches. She listened while imagining how this guy had acted back then, and the more she thought about it, the funnier it was. This was also a kind of enjoyment. Jun Mo Xia continued to refine the pills painstakingly. It seemed that he had put in a lot of effort. It seemed that he had only failed a few times before he successfully refined another batch of pills. Then, he revealed himself, and hid himself at the top of the Jun residence's tower. His spirit sense had covered the entire Jun residence. Two people from the illusory ocean of blood had gone missing in his house last night, and it was expected that they would take action tonight. Therefore, Jun Moxie didn't dare to be careless. The people from the illusory ocean of blood might not be able to enter Mei Xueyan's eyes, but they were still at the level of a great master. If Mei Xueyan hadn't taken action yesterday, Jun Dashao might not have been able to deal with those two black-robed men. Tonight, he had successfully refined 6 pills, and now that he knew that these pills had such a powerful effect, Jun Moxie naturally didn't intend to completely satisfy the needs of the Tian Fa forest. That would be neglecting the essentials. Of these 6 pills, 1 was given to Grandpa Jun, 1 to Jun Wui, 1 to Solitary Eagle, and 1 to Hai Chen Feng and Song Shang. As for Bailey Luo Yun, as long as he can achieve the agreed-upon goal before the time limit, he would also be given 1 pill. Although most of these people hadn't reached the level of Xin Xian to consume the pills, Jun Moxie was confident that he would be able to increase their cultivation in a short period of time. Only when the strength of his own people had truly increased, would they have the capital to look down on the world. With these 3 pills, Jun Moxie could be said to be full of confidence. Although he could only refine 1 pill, Jun Moxie believed that the other 2 pills wouldn't be too far away. Because these days, Jun Moxie could clearly feel his own progress, and faintly felt that he had touched upon the peak of Tian Xian's level. He believed that he was only a step away from Shen Xian's level. The improvement of his own cultivation meant that his alchemy skills had also significantly improved. Below, he could vaguely see that the two children were still practicing. These two mute children were practicing hard in the dark of the night. They didn't seem tired for even a moment. It was unknown how much sweat they were sweating every day. Jun Moxie sighed inwardly. The efforts of these two children are shocking to anyone. However, their innate aptitude was too inferior. They had just taken the 10 years pill, and their strength was still far from reaching the level where they could consume the bone-tempering pill. Moreover, they couldn't speak or write. So, communicating with them was a very difficult matter. They couldn't speak. Jun Moxie's eyes lit up. He had remembered a very special skill, ventriloquism. If he were to impart this skill to these two children, wouldn't this problem be easily solved in a few days? Moreover, these two children weren't born without the ability to speak. He believed that as long as he imparted the basic skill to them, they would be able to speak. Then, all the problems wouldn't exist. Chapter 493. A little distance away from the two children, Yi Guhan sat cross-legged, expressionless. Although he did not make any movements, his mind was filled with thoughts of swordsmanship. He had not done anything else in the past few days, only creating and practicing swordsmanship. With the two children as role models, and the single-armed saber technique as a model, the revitalized Yi Guhan was full of longing for his own unique swordsmanship. Solitary Eagle was also not asleep. He was in Grandpa Jun's study, discussing something with Jun Wui. Everything seemed to be very calm, and everything was filled with peace. Jun Moxie smiled comfortingly. At this moment, the sound of breaking wind suddenly rose from the distant sky, accompanied by an unusually powerful divine sense, unscrupulously pressing towards them. That powerful divine sense carried a majestic anger and a biting cold murderous aura. This imposing aura could swallow the heavens and shake the earth, a peerless power. In all of Jun Moxie's life, there was only one person who could be mentioned in the same breath as him, and that person was Tian Fa's Venerable Mei. The others, including Hermitage's two world-shaking swordsmen, the twin masters of Storm and Gale, were all slightly inferior. Such power had obviously reached the pinnacle of the human world. Jun Moxie's pupils contracted sharply. Finally, it's here. And this time, it's going to be a big one. This person was most likely the ancestor of the Huang family. Because that vigorous anger and murderous aura allowed Jun Moxie to guess his identity. It was actually so unbridled and brazen. Is there really no other expert in this world? Jun Moxie sneered in his heart. This young master has already cast a big net. It seems that I'm going to catch a big fish tonight. In the study, Solitary Eagle and the other two were startled and suddenly raised their heads. In Elegant Fragrance Courtyard, Snake King also had a shocked expression on his face as he quickly walked out of the door. Mei Shuyan's brows furrowed as a hint of anger flashed through her eyes, but she remained seated. In the next moment, a purple figure had already appeared at the top of the Jun family's tallest building, the top of the tower. He was dressed in an exceptionally eye-catching purple robe and had a head of white hair. He was tall and sturdy, and the golden edges of his robe shone dazzlingly under the moonlight. He just stood there with his hands clasped behind his back and didn't make a sound. However, the surging aura from his body had already informed everyone of his arrival. He was waiting for someone from the Jun family to take the initiative to speak up. However, this peerless expert did not expect that when he landed, his 2 feet almost stepped on Jun Moxie, who was also at the top of the pagoda. Young Master Jun, who was hidden in the dark, was forcefully pushed out. This caused young Master Jun to feel somewhat depressed. May I ask who is this esteemed person who has graced my Jun residence in the middle of the night? This old man is Jun Zhantian. Forgive me for not going out to meet you. An unusually deep and steady voice rang out. The one who spoke was naturally Grandpa Jun Zhan Tian. Grandpa Jun had already determined from the aura of this person that no one in the Jun family could match up to this person. However, he still spoke calmly, without the slightest hint of fear. Grandpa Jun may not have had many confrontations with experts in his life, but he had experienced more unforeseen events than anyone else in his lifetime. His ability to remain calm even in the face of a collapsing mountain was something only a few great masters could do. Jun Zhan Tian. Ha, you are not worthy to speak to this old man. The person at the top of the pagoda laughed wildly. Who was the audacious dog who detained the guards of our illusory ocean of blood last night? Quickly come out and save this old man the trouble. A sneer rang out as a person coldly said, Illusory ocean of blood? What a great name. Could it be that as long as they belong to the illusory ocean of blood, they can't be detained? As the sneer rang out, a slender figure slowly walked out from the shadows. His long hair fluttered in the wind, and his eyes were like lightning. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back, and his stature was as straight as a mountain. It was the grassland god of Eagle, Solitary Eagle. The solitary falcon's character had always been unruly, and he had always done things his own way. Therefore, he couldn't bear to see people who bullied others, and yet still tried to act tough. So, how could the solitary falcon not be angry when he saw this man's arrogant and condescending tone? Solitary Eagle had only vaguely heard about last night's incident today. He had originally felt that he had missed a great opportunity. Seeing this person arrive tonight, he was delighted. Even though he knew that he might not be able to defeat this person, he still wanted to fight first. Not to mention anything else, just looking at this person's arrogant and unlucky appearance, Solitary Eagle's heart was in a mess. Are the three holy lands that great? Why does one of them act like I'm number one in the world? I'm not going to piss on you. Who are you? Old Huang looked at him condescendingly. Tell me your name first. Let's see if you're qualified to die in my hands. I've never killed a nameless person in my life. I'm Solitary Eagle. Am I qualified? Solitary Eagle raised his head and looked at this old senior with disdain. In his eyes, this old man was simply putting on an opera. What, am I qualified to die in my hands? Don't kill a nameless person. These were simply lines that could only be used in an opera. He could not help but sigh. The three holy lands had spoiled these people for so many years. It's fine if you just want to fight, but you actually want to be so dramatic? Do you think you're a blue-clothed courtesan? Hee, Solitary Eagle. You must be the last of the 8 great masters, right? I know you. Old Huang raised his white eyebrows and said in a sarcastic tone, but, I only know you. You're not qualified to join our illusory ocean of blood with your current strength. How dare you act so arrogantly in front of this old man? You're not qualified to fight with this old man. We'll know whether I'm qualified or not after we fight. Your Excellency has brazenly come here. So, you won't hide your identity. I wonder which illusory ocean of blood you are. Tell me your name if you're really powerful. Solitary Eagle snorted and asked. I'll let you know. Stand firm. Don't be scared to death by this old man's name. Old Huang looked up and laughed. He then glared at him and said, This old man is Huang Taiyang of the 1,000 Scorching Mountains. Pfft, a sound came from the void. Jun Dashao could not help but laugh. This old man's name is really good. He's called Huang Taiyang. What's more interesting is that his nickname is 1,000 Scorching Mountains. This is a perfect match. It's impossible not to laugh. Jun Moxie finally confirmed that the old man in front of him was the ancestor of the Huang family after he heard this name. However, the Solitary Eagle of the Prairie didn't feel the slightest bit amused even though Jun Moxie found it funny. That was because the name, Huang Taiyang of the 1,000 Scorching Mountains was somewhat comical. However, it represented a legend in the martial world from 130 years ago. Huang Taiyang was born in the ordinary Huang family. His aptitude was only slightly better than others. However, his martial power suddenly increased to the same level as Shen Xian's. He then traveled the martial world, and challenged people everywhere. His actions were ruthless, and it was unknown how many people had died at his hands. It was said that his Xian strength seemed to be limitless. Moreover, it was growing at an exceptionally fast pace. In just a few short years, he had broken through the shackles of the Great Master Realm from the Earth Xian realm. He had become one of the world's top experts in one fell swoop. Moreover, he had become a great legend among the world's Xian experts, a mysterious and powerful legend. Rumor had it that he had single-handedly fought against the two beast kings of the Tianfa forest. And, he hadn't been at a disadvantage. The progress of his Xian strength had always been the most intriguing mystery in the martial world. What kind of power could make an Earth Xian expert break through the Shen Xian realm in just a few short years? Even the Great Master realm? This was also the reason why so many people had come to find him. It could be said that his enemies were everywhere in the world. Countless Xian experts had joined forces to seek revenge against him. However, he had single-handedly killed them all. This bloody legend had finally come to an end when Huang Taiyang had disappeared for no reason. It turned out that the so-called legend had disappeared because he had been lured into the illusory ocean of blood. However, Huang Taiyang's disappearance had led to the ruthless suppression of the Huang family by his enemies in order to lure him out of hiding. The Huang family knew that he had entered the illusory ocean of blood at that time. However, Huang Taiyang hadn't reappeared. Moreover, entering the illusory ocean of blood didn't mean that he had any glory. Instead, they had lost contact with him. The Huang family had lost their strongest backer. So, they had no choice but to helplessly continue to decline. In fact, they had been reduced to a small and ordinary Xian Qi family. In fact, the Dugu family had been their backer in recent years. In fact, the Huang family might have scattered like monkeys when the tree falls if it weren't for them. There's no such thing as a story without coincidences. Nobody could have imagined that this legendary fiend of the older generation would appear out of nowhere when Jun Moxie and Tang Yuan had started to deal with the Huang family. In fact, he had appeared here. So, it's Senior Huang. Could it be that Senior Huang has come here tonight just to show off his power? The solitary eagle knew that the person opposite him was Huang Taiyang. So, he was shocked in his heart. However, he still spoke in a crafty and harsh manner. I've shown off my power. But, this old man doesn't mind killing a few more people. Huang Taiyang looked disdainfully at him. Lengleng smiled and said in a voice like that of a nightingale, for example, some undeserved reputation. They became one of the 8 great masters by luck. Or, they're ranked last among the great masters. But, they shamelessly think that they're the number 1 person in the world. The solitary eagle flew into a rage. His eyes flickered with a fierce light. Huang Taiyang. I'm giving you face by calling you senior. But, don't rely on your rotten signboard to act like a tyrant. You're already old. The current Jianghu isn't the world that you're familiar with. You're an expired legend. So, you should be worried that I won't ruin your 200-year-old reputation. Huang Taiyang burst into loud laughter. It seemed as if he had heard an extremely ridiculous joke. In fact, he was so happy that his body swayed back and forth. Suddenly, a cold and indifferent voice said in an impatient manner, "Where did this old crow come from? Why are you shouting in the middle of the night? You're disturbing my sleep." This voice wasn't very loud. But, it seemed as if a dazzling lightning had cut through the aura that Huang Taiyang had created with his supreme mysterious technique with ease. It seemed as if a sword had suddenly slashed down from the sky to the ground in the middle of the dark night. Every word seemed as if the god of thunder was venting his depression. It seemed as if he was beating a slow drum in the 9th heaven. However, the hearts of everyone who heard the sound of this drum would tremble along with it. Their hearts would tremble along with every word that had been spoken. throbbing. It seemed as if these words had turned into heavy drumsticks. And they were pounding on their hearts. Chapter 494. Today, the two of them are combined. It won't be complete if I take it apart. Tomorrow will erupt. Who is it? May I ask which one of the other two holy lands is here? Please show yourself. Don't let a momentary misunderstanding affect our friendship. Huang Taiyang's expression became cautious. After all, an expert would know when they made their move. It was a very simple sentence, but Huang Taiyang had already experienced the strength of this person. In fact, he didn't even pay attention to the insulting tone in this person's words. Instead, he immediately shouted out his question. And his tone had changed. This was because he had quickly determined that this person's strength was very high. Compared to his own safety, a little insult from words was really insignificant. Huang Taiyang had over 100 years of rich experience in the Jianghu. So, how could he not understand this truth? The Jun family has an expert. Moreover, I'm afraid that this person's strength isn't any less than mine. Huang Taiyang was greatly shocked. It seems that I've underestimated the Jun family. This person and the great master-level falcon could pose a great threat to me if they join hands. In fact, they could even pose a fatal threat to me. Huang Taiyang had given up on the idea of coming to the Jun family for revenge or to extort the bone-tempering pills. In fact, he had even started to look askance at the situation. He was trying to find a way out. His keen senses told him that tonight was going to be extremely dangerous. In fact, he could lose his life if he wasn't careful. This was the intuition that he had tempered over 100 years of experience in the Jianghu. Huang Taiyang had always firmly believed in his intuition. A rustling sound was heard, and a green-clothed girl quietly appeared beside the solitary eagle. Lengleng looked at Huang Taiyang and said, "It's me." The one who had spoken was Mei Xuan. But, the one who had come out was the Qian Sun Serpent Queen. Huang Taiyang's eyes opened wide. He had thought that the person who had appeared before him would be a great master-level expert who was around the same age as him. In fact, he had assumed that she would be an old woman with wrinkled skin and white hair. But, he hadn't expected that she would be such a young and beautiful girl. He couldn't help but be flabbergasted as he asked, "Who are you?" This was also the first time that the Snake King met the solitary eagle since he arrived at the Jun family. But this time, she did not disguise herself. When the solitary eagle saw that it was her, and that she was standing on his side, his eyes widened. If not for the solitary eagle's extraordinary self-control, he would have almost cried out in surprise. Although he managed to restrain himself, his face and eyes were filled with disbelief. This Tian Fa's Poison King, the Lord of Snakes, why would he suddenly appear here? Old Eagle, what are you staring at? Are you surprised that I'm here? Qian Sun Serpent Queen snorted, dissatisfied with his expression. But, the question is, why are you here? The solitary eagle stammered as his brain short-circuited. Shouldn't she have returned to the Tian Fa forest with her big brother? Why would she suddenly appear in the Jun family's residence? Isn't the distance between the north and the south a little too far? I followed you back, hee, the Snake King smiled. Oh, so that's how it is. The solitary eagle had a look of realization on his face. Then, he looked at the Snake King with a dubious look in his eyes. Jun Moxie had mysteriously disappeared for 2 days in the southern heaven region. Could it be that he had gone into the Tian Fa forest and hooked up with the Snake King during those 2 days? What a powerful person. What is a powerful person? Isn't it a powerful person who can do what others can't? It seems that Jun Dashao and the Snake King were in love during those 2 days in the Tian Fa forest. After Jun Moxie left the southern heaven region, the Snake King had followed him all the way here. Oh right, this brat Jun Moxie has been disappearing without a trace these 2 days. It seems like he has gone to meet someone. It's good to be a gigolo. He even hooked up with a beast king. In just a short while, the solitary eagle had already sketched out the script of a romantic drama in his mind. And the more he thought about it, the more he felt that it was possible. In that instant, the solitary eagle was filled with admiration. What's the big deal about seducing a beauty of the world? Look at this Jun Dashao. He had quietly hooked up with a Tian Fa beast king, and a very powerful one at that. This is great ability, ah. It had to be said that solitary eagle's thinking was somewhat outrageous. But, it wasn't far from the truth. It was just that he had chosen the wrong target. The two of them spoke as if there was no one else present. Huang Taiyang was a reclusive expert from the three holy lands. However, no one paid any attention to his question. In fact, this expert's status and cultivation were above the great master level. Huang Taiyang endured for a while. But, he saw that the two of them were getting more and more excited as they talked. In fact, they didn't even put him in their eyes. So, he couldn't help but get angry. He let out a long roar, and spoke in a sinister manner. You two youngsters dare to not put this old man in your eyes? This old man will let you know my power today. Huang Taiyang's silhouette flew down from the top of the pagoda with a whoosh. His white hair fluttered in the wind, and his hands drew a small circle in the air. Then, he floated down. Everyone present felt a strange sensation as his silhouette fell down. It was an exceptionally abrupt feeling. Everyone felt as if their bodies weren't under their control, and were falling forward. In fact, their mouths and noses felt suffocated. Therefore, they couldn't help but be startled. Huang Taiyang's fall seemed to have sucked out all the air in the area. In fact, the huge courtyard had turned into a vacuum zone. Moreover, a xianqi vortex had formed in the middle of this vacuum zone, and was attracting people to fall towards it. They would be at Huang Taiyang's mercy if they were to fall into this vortex. This technique had the shadow of the world cage technique. However, it was far inferior. In fact, it couldn't reach the terrifying realm of trapping the enemy within an inch of space. However, it was still enough to shock the world. Jun Zhantian, Jun Wui, the Snake King, and the solitary eagle were at least as strong as Tian Xian. Therefore, they had reacted in time. However, the others had fallen into a state of temporary loss of control. Jun Zhantian and his son were aware that they weren't strong enough. So, they knew that they would only be a burden to their side if they acted rashly. Therefore, they turned around, and quickly escaped from the range of the vortex's control. Then, Solitary Eagle waved his hand, and the two of them were thrown out of the battle zone. Jun Zhantian had just turned around when he saw that both the Solitary Eagle and the Snake King had already engaged Huang Taiyang with their long hair fluttering in the wind. Both of them were moving in the same manner. The solitary eagle extended his arms, and rapidly rotated them to counteract the powerful suction force. Then, his pair of eagle claws issued a sharp screech in the air. Meanwhile, the Snake King rotated in the opposite direction. He remained motionless at first. Then, his body shot forward, and drew a zigzagging trajectory in the air as he pounced towards Huang Taiyang. A sharp gust of wind resounded as the solitary eagle soared into the sky like a goshawk. He soared into the clouds, and then fell down with a loud rumble. The two of them, one from the top, and the other from the bottom, were like a snake spitting out its tongue. And, the other was like an eagle soaring through the sky. They had completed a near-flawless joint attack in an instant. Eagle and snake fight to death. Huang Taiyang shouted in a stern voice, insignificant skill. Even a grain of rice can shine brilliantly. Suddenly, his body spun in a strange manner. It seemed as if he had turned into a mass of nothingness. However, the entire sky and the earth were filled with palm shadows and fist winds. In fact, it seemed as if thousands of palms and fists were attacking him at the same time. The solitary eagle shouted, "Ghost Eagle." Then, his body abruptly floated up, and his eagle claws covered the sky and the earth as they came pouring down. A green light flashed in the eyes of the Qian Sun Serpent Queen. Then, countless hair-like gray shadows flew out of her body, and approached the enemy. Then, her hands, feet, and hair started to attack in a frenzied manner. Huang Taiyang coldly snorted in astonishment and said, "It's so cold here." "So, where did so many silk snakes come from?" He shook his arms, and the gray shadows scattered in all directions. The solitary eagle and the snake king closed in on each other at this time. Several muffled sounds were heard as the three of them shot out in three different directions. However, their figures didn't stop flying back in the blink of an eye. Instead, they turned around at the same time, and left behind dozens of illusory afterimages in the air. Then, they converged at the same spot at lightning speed. Jun Zhantian and his son watched over the solitary eagle and the snake king from the side. The three figures could still be seen waving their hands and kicking their feet in an indistinct manner at first. However, their speed had increased again in the blink of an eye. In fact, they had almost turned into three dark shadows. Then, they had fused into one. Only the sound of tearing wind was left behind. They had gone from the south to the north, and then from the east to the west. They had gone from the ground to the sky, and then back to the ground again. The place had become a complete mess wherever they went. Flowers, and branches were fluttering in the air. However, they had turned into sharp weapons to attack their opponents. Flying flowers, falling leaves, grass, trees, bamboo, and stones could injure people. In fact, they could even kill people if they were injured. The Snake King and the Solitary Eagle were famous for their speed and agility. The Solitary Eagle was incomparably swift and fierce, while the Snake King was sinister and malicious. The Solitary Eagle and the Snake King were natural enemies. However, the two of them had joined hands to make up for each other's weaknesses. Moreover, this was their first time working together. So, they hadn't reached the stage where they could do whatever they wanted. However, it was enough for them to contend against an existence that had surpassed the level of a great master. However, Huang Taiyang's agility was also astonishing. In fact, he wasn't the least bit inferior to the two of them. Moreover, his Xian Qi was profound. So, his movements were bold, yet peerless. His power and agility combined into one. Therefore, he didn't fall into a disadvantageous position even though he was fighting against the two of them. An ordinary person wouldn't be able to get involved in this battle between the three of them. In fact, countless punches and kicks would be unleashed in every blink of an eye. However, they would also have to endure countless punches and kicks at the same time. Jun Zhantian was the strongest amongst those who were watching the battle from the sidelines. He had already reached the Spirit Xian realm. However, he was unable to differentiate between the enemies and allies. Rashly lending a hand would only result in him becoming a burden. He would not be of any help at all. Huang Taiyang was worthy of being a great expert who had been famous for over 100 years. His strength was extraordinary. So, he hadn't fallen into a disadvantageous position even when facing the Solitary Eagle and the Snake King. In fact, he had even managed to seize the upper hand in the beginning. However, the Eagle and the Snake King were a natural pair. So, the two of them had become more and more harmonious as they fought. In fact, their coordination had become increasingly perfect. Therefore, not only had they managed to suppress Huang Taiyang, but they had also managed to take the initiative. However, defeating Huang Taiyang was still a very difficult task. Huang Taiyang calmly faced the battle. He was advancing step by step. He wasn't anxious or impatient. The corners of his mouth curled into a sneer. After all, Huang Taiyang was confident that he could defeat them if the Jun family only had these two people. In fact, he would have achieved his objective. Solitary Eagle started to laugh wildly as the battle reached its climax. Then, he said, "Satisfying. Satisfying. Today's battle is truly satisfying. Suddenly, a loud roar was heard. Solitary Eagle's body paused in midair for a moment. Then, he returned to the battlefield. However, his fists collided, and his palms met. He didn't retreat even half a step. Instead, he attacked without any intention of defending. Facing the tyrannical pressure of such a peerless expert had caused Solitary Eagle's blood to erupt with a dauntless aura. His long hair fluttered in the wind as he advanced courageously. In fact, it seemed as if he didn't care about his own safety. Solitary Eagle had received at least 80% of Huang Tai Yang's ferocious attacks. Therefore, the pressure on Qian Sun Serpent Queen's side had been greatly reduced. Moreover, how could a beast king of Tian Fa be willing to take advantage of the situation? Therefore, Qian Sun Serpent Queen also let out a shrill cry. Her eyes turned a deathly green. Then, her body shot into the air. Then, she shot down like a javelin from the sky. She arrived above Huang Tai Yang's head. Then, her body suddenly flashed, and transformed into 8 figures. 8 snake kings had attacked at the same time. Huang Tai Yang's hair fluttered in the air as he shouted, "Come at me." His palms were imbued with the power of wind and thunder as they collided with the Snake King. However, the corners of Snake King's mouth curled into a sneer. Then, his body flashed, and the entire space was filled with the beautiful figures of the Snake King. From one side, it seemed as if the entire space of the battlefield was occupied by the Snake King. Huang Tai Yang couldn't help but be startled when he saw such a shocking move. However, Solitary Eagle had also pounced down from the sky as if he didn't care for his life. The corners of Solitary Eagle's mouth curled into a sneer as he mercilessly attacked. He had sealed off the only gap in the Snake King's killing move, the sky. Ghostly Eagle descends from the heavens. Huang Tai Yang roared in anger. Then, he laughed in anger and counterattacked with all his might. Bang! 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 The Snake King's 9 linked palms struck Huang Tai Yang's back in the blink of an eye. However, Solitary Eagle's 7 claws also landed on Huang Tai Yang's chest at the same time. Huang Tai Yang laughed wildly. However, he didn't show the slightest intention of dodging. Instead, he struck back with his palms 3 times. Bang! 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 Then, he kicked out like a whirlwind. The Snake King let out a muffled groan. However, he was also kicked back by Huang Tai Yang. The 3 of them had been injured in the blink of an eye. All 3 of them were top-notch experts in the world. Moreover, they were tyrannical and arrogant people. So, how could they accept such a thing? Suddenly, they became even more berserk. Then, they roared at the same time. Then, they unleashed an all-out attack. An all-out attack. 3 sharp roars reverberated, and soared into the sky. Then, the winds and clouds in the sky changed. The clouds in the sky above the Tianxiang city dispersed in all directions, and revealed the night sky. Then, several loud explosions were heard. The Snake King's roar, the Solitary Eagle's wild laughter, and Huang Tai Yang's curses resounded at the same time. Then, a powerful explosion was heard. This explosive sound brought about a tyrannical reaction, and it seemed as if the entire Tianxiang city was trembling because of it. An abundant and irresistible force erupted from the center with a loud rumble. Jun Zhantian and Jun Wui had been watching from the sidelines. However, they had been forcibly pushed several hundred feet away by this force. Their backs had bumped into the wall with a bang, and their breathing had become stifled. The 3 silhouettes flew down like meteors, and landed in 3 different directions. The Solitary Eagle staggered a bit, and retreated 2 steps after he landed. He wanted to forcibly stabilize his footing. However, Huang Tai Yang's ferocious strength hadn't dissipated yet. So, he rammed into him again. The Solitary Eagle wasn't able to stop the momentum of his retreat. So, he retreated another 2 steps. His complexion turned red, and then white. Then, a wisp of fresh blood slowly trickled down from the corner of his mouth. The Snake King was sent flying like a kite with a broken string. He somersaulted a few times in the air, and staggered a few steps back after he landed. His beautiful face had turned pale. However, it seemed as if his legs had taken root in the ground. They hadn't moved at all. However, his upper body couldn't help but lean back a little. His long hair fluttered in a strange manner, and issued a hissing sound. Huang Taiyang landed on the ground with a loud bang, and spun around twice. His originally neatly combed white hair had become completely disheveled at this moment. It was draped over his shoulders, and he looked like a ferocious ghost. His face was full of rage. He roared, and shook his arms. Then, dozens of purple objects fluttered down from his body like butterflies. It turned out that Huang Taiyang had been locked onto by the snake eagles and the eagles' moves during the fierce battle. So, he had been left with no choice. Therefore, he had been struck by 9 palms and 7 claws. His Xian cultivation and valiant body had been able to withstand the attacks. However, his purple robe had been left with 16 clear palm prints. Now that the 3 of them had separated, the 16 palm prints on his robe had also fallen off his body. It fluttered to the ground. Huang Taiyang's purple robe had turned into a beggar's outfit. And, a golden soft armor had been revealed beneath it. Jun Moxie had concealed himself as he watched the battle. However, he couldn't help but suck in a mouthful of cold air. The solitary eagle and the Snake King's palms were extremely frightening. Jun Moxie was well aware of this fact. However, Huang Taiyang's body hadn't suffered any damage even though he had been struck by these 16 solid attacks. The soft armor on his body had certainly played a considerable role. However, this old man's martial power had reached an extremely high level. So, the toughness of his body had also reached an appalling level. No wonder Mei Xuan had once said that I would be powerless against a great master even if my agility technique is extremely fast. Moreover, I have a peerless sword in my hand. Perhaps, my sneak attack on Huang Taiyang wouldn't have had much of an effect on him. Such a freak actually exists in this world. Jun Moxie secretly rejoiced. Fortunately, I hadn't used my divine sword to mount a sneak attack on him when he had first arrived. Otherwise, I would have gone for wool and come home shorn. Huang Taiyang silently lowered his head and looked at his clothes. He raised his head after a long while. Then, he opened his mouth, and revealed a smile that didn't seem like a smile. Then, he said in a gloomy manner, "Not simple. This old man hasn't been injured in the last 100 years. But, I've been forced into such a state by you 2 juniors. This is a novel feeling. Ha ha ha. Not bad. Not bad. This is very satisfying. This is extremely satisfying." He paused and looked at Solitary Eagle. "Solitary Eagle, it seems that your reputation isn't undeserved. This old man has admitted that your reputation as one of the 8 great masters isn't undeserved. However, it's a pity that you're going to die here soon, even though you've just obtained my recognition as a great master. It's a pity that you're going to die here." Solitary Eagle sneered and said, "It's not up to you to decide whether I'm going to die or not. Or when I'm going to die." Huang Taiyang ignored him. Instead, he looked at the Qian Sun Serpent Queen with a gloomy expression in his eyes. "Little girl, you're not simple either. This old man's eyes aren't blurry, and I'm guessing correctly. You're the Snake King of the Tianfa Forest, right? You clearly know that I'm the Snake King of Tianfa. But, you still dare to call me little girl? Huang Taiyang, you've got guts. Aren't you a little too arrogant? You're merely 200 years old. Yet, you dare to flaunt your seniority in front of me?" The Qian Sun Serpent Queen didn't show any mercy as she retorted in a sarcastic manner. "Hee hee, the beast kings of the Tian Fa forest are admittedly very old. But, their ages will be calculated according to the age of humans once they take human form. Your Excellency the Snake King of Tian Fa, I'm afraid that you haven't taken human form for more than 30 years, right? But, this old man has lived for more than 200 years. So, what's wrong with calling you little girl? Do you really want this old man to call you a stinky snake? Huang Taiyang smiled sinisterly. But, his words were very malicious. Disgraceful. What are you talking about? That stinky snake. The Qian Sun Serpent Queen hadn't taken human form for long. In fact, it hadn't even been 20 years. So, her temperament wasn't stable enough. Moreover, her flaws had been exposed in the past. And, she knew that women loved beauty and hated ugliness. Therefore, she was enraged by Huang Taiyang. But, it turns out that the Tian Fa forest is supporting you from behind. Snake King, hee hee. It's a very big name. But, it's a pity that the Tian Fa forest of 200 years ago might have given me some fear. But, now, ha ha ha. The Tian Fa forest is like a flower of the past. You're no longer qualified to join the ranks of the Four Holy Lands. And, you're even less qualified to enter the eyes of the hidden experts of my illusory ocean of blood. You're just a trifling little snake. Do you really think that you're an azure dragon? Ha ha. Huang Taiyang's complexion had turned gloomy. And, his words had become even more enigmatic and sarcastic. The Tian Fa forest may not be as strong as it was in the past. But, the illusory ocean of blood's hidden experts are nothing in the eyes of our Tian Fa forest. The Qian Sun Serpent Queen snorted. A fierce light flickered in her eyes as she looked for an opportunity to attack. This old man's words are too infuriating. So, how can I vent my anger if I don't teach him a lesson? But, the Snake King's appearance here has come as a surprise to this old man. Huang Taiyang's eyes flashed as he looked at the Snake King's trembling right hand. Then, he spoke in an even more infuriating manner. I've heard that the Jun family has a shameless brat. He even went as far as his own sister-in-law. And, he made that woman lose her chastity without any regrets or resentment. It seems that this brat is very good at dealing with women. Ha ha. Huang Taiyang's eyes flashed as he spoke in a sinister manner. I've also heard that this despicable brat had gone to the Tian Fa forest some time ago. Could it be that the Snake King was careless, and had been deceived by this brat? And, he had no choice but to follow him to the Tian Fa forest? Ah, it seems like that's the case. It's no wonder that the Snake King pretends to be a peerless beauty. And, he even looks like a little bird. So, it turns out that a woman dresses up for the man who pleases her. Ha ha ha. But, I don't know if that debauchee of the Jun family will be able to satisfy the Snake King's request. But, this old man can introduce a few to you, Snake King. They'll make you happy, ha ha ha. Chapter 495. Today's Eruption, First Chapter. Second Chapter after 10 minutes. You bastard. You filthy thing. You call yourself a member of the Three Holy Lands. I'll kill you. The Snake King flew into a rage. So, she sprung up, and was about to attack. Huang Taiyang laughed heartily. Then, he moved forward to meet her. This was exactly what he had planned. His martial power was higher than that of these two. But, these two were a snake and an eagle. So, they were complementing each other's weaknesses. So, their power would increase by several times if they could cooperate seamlessly. Huang Taiyang might be able to defeat them at that time. But, he would have to pay a considerable price for it. So, he had to infuriate one of them first. Then, he would kill the other one with lightning speed. Then, everything else would be under his control. This was also the real reason why he didn't hesitate to lower his own status and spout such filthy words. However, he wasn't a good person. So, such tricks were a common occurrence for him. Don't be fooled by his words, looking down on him, but when he faced the attack, he had already gathered all the power in his body. He would kill the Snake King in one fell swoop. Even if he couldn't, he would make her lose her combat strength after this strike. Only then would he be able to take control of the situation. An ominous glint flashed in Huang Taiyang's eyes. His murderous intention had already appeared. The joints of his entire body issued a small explosive sound. This was the sign that he was going to use all of his martial power to determine the outcome of the battle in one move. He wouldn't allow the Snake King to escape from his palm this time. Such an opportunity was very rare. It was about to be triggered. Huang Taiyang and the Qian Sun Serpent Queen's figures were about to come into contact. Suddenly, a graceful figure appeared in the air. Then, she shouted, "Go back." The Qian Sun Serpent Queen's figure quickly changed from advancing forward to retreating as soon as she heard this shout. Then, she returned to her original position in a flash. She didn't show the slightest bit of hesitation or defiance. Huang Taiyang was startled. He looked up, and saw the silhouette of a lustrous white palm in front of him. He was overwhelmed with shock. This person has been hiding on the side all along. But, I haven't even noticed him. Who is this person? Just based on this point, this person's strength was definitely not below his. He suddenly felt extremely regretful. It seemed that the person who had spoken at the beginning was the person who had just come out. However, he had misjudged and thought that the person who spoke was the Snake King. Seeing that the Snake King had come out, he no longer paid attention to his surroundings. Who would have known that the other side was hiding such a super expert? If he were to join hands with the Eagle and Snake Supremes, wouldn't he be in trouble? In that moment of hesitation and retreat, the palm shadows in front of him had already turned into a densely packed mountain of palms. Only at this moment did the sharp sound of the palm wind breaking through the air suddenly ring out. The speed of this person's attack had already surpassed the speed of sound. The tens of thousands of palm winds instantly converged together and crashed down with an earth-shattering force. It was as if the 9 nether ghost gates had suddenly opened and millions of malicious spirits rushed out. One hit kill, one hit kill. During this period of time, Mei Shuyan had been extremely frustrated. Originally, she didn't want to make a move, but at this critical moment, she finally showed herself. Moreover, Huang Taiyang's words had aroused her anger. Damn it! What did he mean by "deceive me"? Is this old bastard pointing at the mulberry tree and cursing the locust tree? Therefore, the great beauty Mei Shuyan rushed out in a fit of rage. Then, she brandished her hand and sent out 999 palms. She suddenly felt that the frustration in her heart had been removed by a lot. It seemed that beating and abusing people was the best way to vent one's anger. Therefore, Mei Shuyan didn't relax. Therefore, Huang Taiyang's situation was very tragic, very tragic. Moreover, Huang Taiyang's tragedy was similar to Li Ju Tian's. And it was also because of one person, Jun Moxie. This had aroused Mei Shuyan's anger. Huang Taiyang had been caught off guard in the face of such an attack. So, he had been forced to retreat. But, how could the speed of his retreat compare to Mei Shuyan's terrifying speed? There was a big gap between the two of them. Moreover, Mei Shuyan's speed had reached a terrifying limit after she had taken the vitality linkage pill. Bang 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 bang. A series of palms struck Huang Taiyang's body like firecrackers. Huang Taiyang bellowed, and his body was sent flying like a kite with a broken string. He couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. His body was almost indestructible. But, he had received serious injuries from the first round of attacks. He turned over, and stood shakily. There was blood at the corner of his mouth. His expression was distorted like that of a malicious spirit. He then asked in a mournful voice, Who are you? Who are you? Unfortunately, Huang Taiyang's reply was an even more ferocious barrage of attacks. These attacks weren't only ferocious and concentrated, they were also fatal. Huang Taiyang was startled. He hadn't been able to clearly see the appearance of this person even though he was facing the shadow of death. He could only vaguely see the vague silhouette of that person. Moreover, he could also hear a clear and melodious voice. However, his body had already suffered a series of heavy blows in quick succession. Huang Taiyang hadn't even dreamed that someone in this world could achieve such a level of agility. His body was suffering an extremely concentrated barrage of attacks. He had once believed that his body was indestructible. However, he didn't have the slightest ability to resist. In fact, his entire body and even his soul could only feel one thing: pain. This was a strange feeling that he hadn't felt for over 100 years. And, this long-lost feeling made the lawless scorching sun thousand mountains taste the long-lost taste of fear. He had clearly determined that the assailant could have taken his life. In fact, a heavy blow would have sufficed if the assailant had intended to kill him. However, he didn't know why the assailant didn't want to kill him. Instead, the assailant was blindly ravaging him to vent his negative emotions. Huang Taiyang had also determined that the assailant didn't intend to kill him. But, he would have been powerless to escape in the time it would take to drink a cup of tea if this continued. The barrage of attacks wasn't fatal, but it was extremely concentrated. And, it was enough to destroy his physical strength. Huang Taiyang forcefully raised his Xian Qi. Then, he let out a long and mournful cry, and soared into the sky. But, his back received 4 consecutive palm strikes with a bang as he got up. Fortunately, he finally got up. Was there still hope for him to escape? The invisible Jun Moxie was in high spirits as he looked at this scene. So, he shouted loudly, "Don't let him escape. Capture him alive." The solitary eagle and the snake king jumped up at the same time. They then chased after Huang Taiyang like a bolt of lightning. They hadn't acted according to Jun Dashao's instructions. But, this damned Huang Taiyang had intended to kill them. So, they had already formed an enmity with him. So, it would have been great if they could kill him in one fell swoop. This was especially true for the Qian Sun Serpent Queen. She would have suffered serious injuries if it weren't for Mei Shuyan's assistance. She would have lost her human form in the best-case scenario. But, she would have lost her life in the worst-case scenario. So, she still felt a lingering fear when she thought about it. Moreover, this old man's frivolous words had greatly damaged her reputation. Therefore, the Snake King was very angry. So, how could he let such a big enmity go so easily? The solitary eagle and Huang Taiyang didn't have any deep enmity between them. But, he still had a golden opportunity to beat a drowning dog in front of him. So, how could he not kill him? Huang Taiyang leapt up with great difficulty. He felt that he had finally escaped from the dangerous shadow of death. So, he heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. That was because he had discovered that the dreadful white-clothed figure had disappeared without a trace. It hadn't pursued him. The shadow of death had disappeared. So, he couldn't help but relax a little. And, he immediately felt pain all over his body. He was about to rush to the top of the wall in a panic. However, he secretly vowed in his heart, the Jun family shouldn't get involved in these muddy waters if I don't have the strength to do so. After all, it's no different from delivering food to the Jun family in the face of such an inexplicable powerhouse. Suddenly, his vision darkened. The powerful claws of the solitary eagle were about to grab his head. Huang Taiyang roared in anger. He wasn't in a good state at the moment. But, he wasn't afraid of the solitary eagle. So, he used his palm to counterattack. The solitary eagle snorted and smiled. But, he didn't try to evade the attack. Instead, he madly grabbed it with his right palm. The two palms and claws collided. Huang Taiyang screamed. He was no match for the solitary eagle. So, his shoulder was drenched in blood. However, this was reasonable. After all, he had already endured hundreds of palm strikes from Mei Xuan. In fact, Mei Xuan had only wanted to vent her depression. She had no intention of taking his life. Otherwise, he would have turned into a pile of rotten meat by now. In fact, he might have even been turned into minced meat by now. However, his vitality would have been greatly damaged even if that had been the case. And, his internal organs would have been damaged as well. Huang Taiyang had overestimated himself. So, he hadn't taken the solitary eagle seriously. However, he could have easily parried this claw attack. In fact, he could have even counterattacked. In fact, he could have even forced the solitary eagle into a very difficult situation. But, it was a pity that time had changed. So, he didn't have the strength to parry this attack. Huang Taiyang had been injured by the solitary eagle's claw attack. But, he still raised his Xian Qi. So, he crazily rushed to the top of the wall while half of his body was covered in blood. However, he saw that the Snake King was already waiting for him there. Lengleng smiled, "Old man, why are you in such a hurry? It won't be too late to leave after you pay the price for your frivolous words." He didn't say anything. Instead, he attacked with his hands, feet, and palms at the same time. The Snake King wasn't Mei Xuan. So, he couldn't use any method to deal a fatal blow. Huang Taiyang felt as if he was a tiger that had fallen from grace. He regretted it. "I shouldn't have been so arrogant tonight. I should have come here alone. I had wanted to fight against an aristocratic family single-handedly. I wanted to show my awe-inspiring might and awe the world. I wanted to show that I'm old, but I'm still as powerful as ever." However, he hadn't expected that he would have poked a hornet's nest. Moreover, he had been stung all over his face. These hornets weren't just sharp. They were also extremely poisonous. In fact, they had the power to seal one's throat upon contact. Blood splattered everywhere. Huang Taiyang howled miserably, and soared into the sky once again. He had taken the full brunt of the Snake King's 13 palms and 6 kicks. However, this old man didn't fail to live up to his reputation as a Holy Land's powerhouse. So, he still had the strength to spare. He let out a long and miserable howl. Then, he swept across the sky, and fled for his life. His speed was extremely fast. In fact, even the eagle and the Snake King, who were famous for their agility techniques, couldn't catch up to him. The Qian Sun Serpent Queen and the solitary eagle looked at each other in amazement. This Huang Taiyang is worthy of being a tyrannical existence above the great master level. He has received more than 100 heavy blows from Mei Xuan. Then, he has received the full strength of the solitary eagle's claw attack. Then, he has received the final blow from the Qian Sun Serpent Queen. But, he still has the strength to escape. This level of martial power is frightening. He deserves to be called a powerhouse above the great master level. Both of them could see that Mei Xuan didn't want to take Huang Taiyang's life. However, the enmity between them and Huang Taiyang was too great. Therefore, they had no choice but to be ruthless in their attacks. However, Huang Taiyang had still managed to escape even though he had been attacked by 3 powerful experts in a row. He had suffered 100 sorrows at the same time. Chapter 496. Today's outbreak. The second update has arrived. The third update is being modified, in half an hour. Huang Taiyang's figure was drenched in blood as he soared into the sky. He had covered a distance of 6 or 7 meters in a single leap. Under the starlight, his gold-rimmed body and the golden inner armor on his body were particularly eye-catching. Even the solitary eagle or the Snake King wouldn't be able to catch up to him in time at this distance. Huang Taiyang's speed was simply too fast. No one could match his speed apart from the Mei clan's great beauty. Huang Taiyang turned around as he fled, and roared, "Jun family's younger generation, I've been attacked by a group of despicable people. I swear to take revenge for this. I'm not a man if I don't flatten the Jun family. I won't let that bastard who was hiding in the dark get away either. Damn it. You dare to mess with me? I'll let you know what it means to court death." Huang Taiyang was aware that he had escaped, and that his life was no longer in danger. But, he still felt sullen about the losses he had suffered tonight. So, he decided that he would definitely take revenge once he returned home. Huang Taiyang's body gradually fell down as he screamed. His xian qi had been consumed to the extreme. So, he was falling at a rapid speed. He took a deep breath, and waited for his feet to touch the ground. Then, he would take another breath, and fly away again. He would disappear without a trace in 2 or 3 leaps given his strength. Huang Taiyang's mind was filled with malicious thoughts and plans for revenge. He had roamed the world for nearly 200 years. But, when had he ever suffered such a loss? Even when hundreds of experts had besieged him at the peak of his enemy's strength. But, he had still managed to kill his enemies 7 times in a row. And, he had even managed to escape with ease. But, he hadn't expected that he would nearly lose his life in this seemingly harmless Jun family. His chest seemed to be burning with boundless anger. And, the internal injuries he had sustained had made him even more hateful. His body had been struck by no less than 200 palm strikes. Fortunately, this old man was the one who came. Otherwise, wouldn't he have been turned into minced meat? Huang Taiyang had forgotten that the person who had attacked him hadn't intended to kill him. In fact, he only remembered that he had been struck by more than 200 palm strikes. This hatred was absolutely irreconcilable. He had always been a person who would seek revenge for the smallest grievance. This kind of hatred was enough for him to remember for eternity. His feet were just a hair's breadth away from touching the ground. As long as his toes touched the ground, he would be able to fly freely in the sky and leap freely in the sea. The annihilation of the Jun family was right in front of them. How could a mere worldly family bear the wrath of the holy land of the unworldly world? Huang Taiyang hadn't truly taken his revenge yet, and he was still fleeing for his life. However, his heart was already filled with an indescribable pleasure of tyrannical revenge. In fact, he was already imagining the myriad of methods he would use to torture and humiliate the Jun family in the future. He would definitely repay the humiliation he had suffered today 100-fold, 1,000-fold, 10,000-fold. Right now, it wasn't just for revenge, it was for his own injury. Absolutely intolerable. He absolutely could not let this chance slip by. Not only the members of the Jun family, but even the Jun family servants, guests, and everyone else related to the Jun family will suffer my most cruel and bloody revenge. I swear. Huang Taiyang fiercely shouted as he thought about this, Jun family. I'll trample all of you in the future. This old man swears that I'm not a man even if a dog escapes. Enjoy the few remaining moments of your lives. Ha ha ha. His cruel voice shook the entire night sky. Suddenly, a cold voice Lenglang spoke, "You're not a man. That's not a funny joke. Do you think you can still be a man? Do you think you'll be able to leave this place alive?" A real sun suddenly appeared in front of Huang Taiyang's eyes as these cold words were spoken. His eyes were filled with a dazzling radiance. In fact, it was so dazzling that it couldn't be looked at directly. The blazing sun was emitting a myriad of rays of light. It was undoubtedly much more dazzling than Huang Taiyang. The blazing and resplendent white light suddenly emitted countless sword energies. Then, it abruptly appeared in the darkness of the night. Then, another sword light flew towards Huang Taiyang's weak throat like a bolt of lightning. It's a midstream attack. This sword attack was ingenious. The timing was precise. And the angle was narrow. In fact, even a 200-year-old peak expert like Huang Taiyang wanted to curse out loud. Moreover, he wanted to use the most vicious language to curse out loud. However, he didn't have the time. Even if he had the time, he wouldn't have dared to waste the slightest bit of his strength in the face of such a brilliant sword attack. That was because he didn't have the time to react at all. The person who had launched this fatal attack was none other than Jun Moxie. Jun Dashao had waited for a long time for such an excellent opportunity to kill Huang Taiyang. So, how could he let it go? How could he let it go? He had cultivated a keen sense of smell as an assassin in his previous life. Therefore, he could easily tell that Huang Taiyang wasn't as valiant as he used to be. So, he could kill him as long as he had the right opportunity. I'm afraid that I won't get such a rare opportunity again if I miss it. Therefore, Jun Moxie had made a prompt decision. He had attacked with all his strength. Jun Moxie had considered the resistance of the breeze in the air when he had attacked. It didn't matter whether it was the angle, speed, or timing of his attack. Jun Moxie was very confident in himself. Even the supreme assassin Chu Chihuan, who had never been seen in this life, wouldn't be able to pull off such a marvelous sword attack. This sword attack was the pinnacle of an assassin's skill. This sword attack was a legend for an assassin. It was a sure-kill sword, a sure-kill sword. Not only did it sever everything, but it also severed everything. Mei Xuan was watching from afar. So, she naturally saw this brilliant sword attack. The grasp of this sword attack had reached the pinnacle of perfection. Therefore, she couldn't help but feel amazed. In fact, she even felt ashamed of her own inferiority. She asked herself, I'm afraid that I wouldn't have been able to achieve such perfection if I had been in his place. The pleasant surprise was that Jun Moxie's swordsmanship had already reached the point of perfection. In fact, it could be said that Jun Moxie's swordsmanship had already reached the point of perfection. However, she had a doubt in her heart at the same time. This kid is born to be an assassin. Or, he's an assassin for all eternity. Otherwise, how could he have unleashed such a perfect and brilliant sword attack at such a young age? Even a great master with 100 years of cultivation wouldn't have been able to dodge this sword attack. Tian Fa's #1 expert, Mei Xuan, and Venerable Mei, would feel ashamed of their inferiority. Could it be that Tian Xian's strength is enough to kill an existence that surpasses the great masters? In fact, this possibility was about to appear in front of everyone's eyes. Huang Taiyang's feet hadn't touched the ground yet. However, he could already feel the aura of the earth. It was so close that it was so close. However, it was so close that it was as far as the eye could see. His entire body was like a candle that was stuck in a slanted position. It seemed as if he was trying his best to fall to the ground. In fact, he had already breathed in a mouthful of air. He was waiting to fall to the ground to catch his breath. Then, he would escape without a trace. However, such a fatal sword attack had appeared at this crucial moment. It was infinitely subtle. But, it was the sword of the Grim Reaper. Huang Taiyang issued a long cry of despair. He didn't have the time to think before the sword hit him. He had burst forth with his last bit of potential. His body suddenly leaned back, and fiercely punched his chest at the same time. The qi in his dantian vibrated. Then, the qi in his dantian surged, and the remaining potential in his body was stimulated. He spat out a perfectly round column of blood from his mouth. He then used it as a weapon, and shot it towards the resplendent sword light like a javelin. Huang Taiyang was well aware that he would lose more than half of his Xian strength after this attack. In fact, he wouldn't be able to return to his peak state even if he could recover from his injuries in the future. However, he had no other choice. That was because this was the only way he could save himself. His throat would have been pierced through if he didn't do this. Which was more important? His life or losing half of his strength? Even a 3-year-old child could answer this question. So, how could Huang Taiyang, who cherished his life more and more as he grew older? An old man's greatest hope was to live on. He was only 200 years old. But, he still wanted to live for more than 200 years. After all, he hadn't enjoyed enough of the beautiful things in this world. He still wanted to maintain the glory of being at the peak for a long time. Therefore, he would rather mutilate himself in order to escape with his life. There's hope as long as the green hills are there. The swordlight was so close that Huang Taiyang's neck had already been stimulated by the coldness of the swordlight. In fact, goosebumps had already formed on his neck. The arrow of blood had inexplicably appeared, and had suddenly shot towards Jun Moxie. Jun Moxie slightly tilted his head behind the swordlight, and the arrow of blood brushed past his ear with a schwa sound. The long hair on his temples had been lifted by the wind, and had been fluttering in the air. However, Huang Taiyang's body hadn't even had the time to blink. His body had already escaped from the blade of the swordlight. Then, he had fallen to the ground. However, he had retracted his legs as he had fallen. Then, he had fiercely stomped on the ground with his heels. And, a large amount of soil had been sent flying towards Jun Moxie like countless sharp hidden weapons. Huang Taiyang's body. However, Huang Taiyang's body had borrowed the reactionary force of his feet to slide across the ground like a swordfish in the water. His back had stuck close to the ground as he had slid out. Huang Taiyang had used up almost all of his strength in this slide. And, he had slid back more than 400 feet. The speed at which he had retreated was so fast that a wisp of green smoke was emitted from the friction between his back and the ground. Then, there was a strange smell of burning flesh. The friction between his back and the ground was so fast that it seemed as if his flesh had been cooked. Chapter 497. Eruption. Third attack. Fourth more effort. It was the place where he had just fought. He had just fought with Solitary Eagle, and had courageously forced the Qian Sun Serpent Queen to retreat. It was also the place where he had suffered the greatest humiliation in his life. The most interesting thing was that this senior Huang didn't even know about it. That was because he couldn't even take care of himself. He sensitively sensed that although he had successfully dodged that sword did not give up on chasing after him at all. That sword's dense sword energy was still closely chasing after him. That bone-piercing sword energy was still hovering around his eyes, throat, and other parts of his body. He believed that it would mercilessly pierce into his body as soon as it got the chance. His desperate retreat had gone against his opponent's expectations. He had temporarily escaped from the threat of death. But, his opponent hadn't given up on chasing after him. However, Huang Taiyang's sudden retreat had startled Solitary Eagle and the others. This old man was cursing in high spirits a moment ago. So, why did he suddenly break through the wall and come back? Is he coming back to kill us? Isn't he too courageous? Solitary Eagle and the Snake King had used all their strength to obstruct Huang Taiyang. Then, they had returned to their original positions. Both of them had consumed a lot of energy in this battle. So, they had only fought for a short time. However, both of them were well aware that they had been hovering on the line between life and death. Such a battle was even more dangerous than the one they had fought in the Tianfa forest. An expert above the great master level wasn't easy to deal with. Therefore, both of them had seized the time to adjust their breathing. So, they hadn't climbed up high to watch the battle. Therefore, they had missed the most wonderful scene. Moreover, they hadn't expected that Huang Taiyang would run into a tyrannical existence on the same level as the great master assassin Chu Chihuan. Moreover, he had been forced to retreat in panic. However, he had broken through the wall, and had returned to his original position. However, their misgivings were dispelled. Huang Taiyang's rapidly retreating body was followed by a white-clothed silhouette. It flew out of the big hole that Huang Taiyang had created a while ago with a whoosh sound. It passed through the smoke and dust, and arrived at a lightning speed. The long sword in its hand emitted a splendid and dazzling sword light, piercing through the air. The sword-wielding man was handsome and tall. His body was cold and his expression was murderous. It was Jun Moxie. Huang Taiyang bellowed. Then, he suddenly turned around while he was retreating. It seemed as if he didn't care about his life. Then, he changed his direction, and continued to retreat. His body was still lying flat on the ground. After circling around, the ground was filled with a lot of flesh and blood. On his back, other than the golden soft armor on his back that could still serve as a cover, the rest of his body was completely exposed, such as his shoulders, thighs, buttocks, and other places. This rapid rotation had flattened almost all the flesh and blood in those places. In fact, it seemed as if a pig had been slaughtered on the ground. Jun Moxie didn't stop his sword. His face remained calm and collected. However, the murderous intention in his eyes was still exuberant. A man can be so ruthless towards himself. So, one can well imagine how ruthless he is towards his enemies. This man can't be allowed to live. The tip of his sword was still less than a foot away from Huang Taiyang's throat even though he had changed his direction. Huang Taiyang's throat issued a blood-curdling screech. It didn't sound like a human's voice anymore. His eyes were wide open, and his pupils were so wide that they seemed as if they would burst. Saliva was flowing out of the corner of his mouth. His feet were constantly stomping on the ground. The ground was hard, but it was filled with footprints and small pits. Dust was rising into the sky. He was using this kind of counterforce to futilely dodge over and over again. However, dodging over and over again had sped up the loss of the muscles on his shoulders, thighs, and buttocks. In fact, they had almost turned into minced meat, and had been mixed into the soil. Anyone would have seen Huang Taiyang's shoulders and thighs at this time. They would have discovered that there was no flesh or blood on these parts of the illusory ocean of blood's great master-level expert. In fact, his eerie white bones had been exposed to the outside world. In fact, a thick layer of his bones had been worn away. However, Huang Taiyang didn't feel the slightest bit of pain. That was because his mind had been shrouded by the shadow of death. Huang Taiyang wouldn't hesitate to chop off his own head if he were to be told that he would be able to escape alive if he were to chop off his own head. That was because he had already collapsed. In fact, he had thoroughly collapsed. This sword was like a maggot in one's tarsal bone. It was unrelenting as it was aimed at his throat. He was a dignified great master-level expert. However, he didn't even have the opportunity to stand up. Instead, he had been forced into such a bad situation. In fact, he could have chosen to take this sword head-on if he had been at the peak of his martial power. Or, he could have used his chin and collarbone to catch the sword, and then counterattacked. In fact, he could have easily done this with his strength. But now, after receiving more than 200 heavy blows, he had completely lost that confidence. He clearly knew that if he were to be pierced in the throat by this sword, then he would definitely die. Therefore, Huang Taiyang could only struggle to escape. He would have looked for an opportunity to stand up. He would have had a chance to fight or flee. However, he had never imagined that this man's sword would be so precise and frightening. In fact, he didn't even have the time to blink his eyes, let alone stand up. He was an expert who had surpassed the great master level. He had been a peerless expert who had moved unhindered throughout the world in the past. However, he had been forced into such a situation by an unknown young man. Sad, this is too sad. Huang Taiyang was relying entirely on his tenacious will to survive. He was still rubbing against the ground. He was dodging for his life. He was constantly leaving pools of blood on the ground. Moreover, he was also burning green smoke due to the extreme speed of the rubbing against the ground. Huang Taiyang wouldn't have been able to persevere if Jun Moxie had stopped his pursuit at this time. In fact, he would have been on the verge of death. In fact, he might have even died on the spot. That was because the blood in his body had almost been drained. However, Jun Moxie didn't stop. In fact, he didn't seem to have the slightest intention of stopping. He hated people who threatened him the most. Huang Taiyang and the Huang family had undoubtedly violated the greatest taboo of this evil monarch. Jun Moxie didn't want to kill Huang Taiyang with a single sword strike. Instead, he wanted Huang Taiyang to grind himself to death. Huang Taiyang dodged with all his might as he thrust his sword forward once again. Then, the golden soft armor on his back finally couldn't bear the burden anymore. So, it was scraped to pieces by him. And, another pool of blood was left on the ground. This patch of blood could be seen in its entirety. It was the only part of his skin that was protected by his back. In fact, it was even his flesh and blood. That was because there wasn't any flesh or blood on top of it. Therefore, the skin and flesh on his back seemed to be hanging in mid-air after losing the protection of the golden soft armor. In fact, it would fall with a single touch. It was a ghastly and extremely bloody scene. The time has come. Jun Moxie took a deep breath. Then, he sheathed his sword with a clang sound. Then, he crossed his hands behind his back, and looked at Huang Taiyang in a lenglang manner. The corners of his mouth curled into a faint smile. Huang Taiyang finally caught his breath. He didn't know where he got the strength from, but he turned over and jumped up. He wanted to run away. But, he discovered that he didn't have the slightest bit of strength left in his body. He wanted to raise his qi to heal his injuries. But, he discovered that the incomparably profound Xian technique that he had painstakingly cultivated for nearly 200 years had disappeared. Huang Taiyang turned pale with fright. He looked down, and discovered that his abdomen had completely deflated. In fact, it seemed as if a big hole had appeared in it. He howled in pain. Then, he blankly moved his hand. Suddenly, his entire abdomen fell off. And, Huang Taiyang shockingly saw the ground behind him from his abdomen. The only thing blocking his path was his spine. However, both sides of his spine were completely transparent. In fact, even his ribs were gone. Huang Taiyang opened his eyes wide. What's going on? How did I see the ground through my body? Where's my body? Where are my 5 viscera and 6 bowels? Where's my back? Where did they go? He turned his head with great difficulty, and looked at his back. Then, he suddenly issued an extremely miserable howl. That was because he discovered that his body had disappeared. In fact, it had been worn away, only a thin layer of his pelvis and thighs was left. Huang Taiyang blankly turned his head. Then, he looked at Jun Moxie with lifeless eyes. Then, he asked, "Where's my flesh?" Jun Moxie frowned. Lengleng replied, "It's like garbage. Even dogs won't eat it." Huang Taiyang blankly uttered an "oh." It seemed as if he had understood everything. Then, a cracking sound was heard as his spine broke. And, he sat down on the ground. It must have been very painful. But, he didn't seem to feel anything. His face was still blank and blank. Then, a strange smile appeared on his face after a while. He muttered in a low voice, "I was very young back then. I had intruded into the 9 Serenities Valley. He. There were 4 people fighting inside. And, these 4 people were all great masters. They were almost at the end of their lives at that time. I promised them to do one thing for each of them. I swore that my flesh and blood would be ground away piece by piece if I couldn't do it. They believed in my oath. So, they passed on their Xian arts to me before they died. So, I became stronger overnight. I became a top-notch expert step by step. I became Tian Xian. I became a great master. I became a great master. I became a great master. But, I didn't do what I promised them. Ah, people. The living are busy with their own things. So, who would be interested in doing things for the dead? That oath was the cruelest way to die. But, it was also the most impossible oath to fulfill. Ha ha. He opened his eyes, and bitterly laughed. Then, he blankly said, so, there really is such a way to die. Did I fulfill my oath? Is there really such a way? Is there really such a way? Huang Taiyang spoke till here. Then, his head suddenly tilted to one side. Then, he silently died. Then, a pop sound was heard. His neck couldn't support his crooked head anymore. So, it finally broke. And, Huang Taiyang's head rolled on the ground. It rolled a few times. Then, it faced the sky, and opened its eyes wide. Chapter 498. Jun Zhantian and Jun Wuyi stared blankly. Their eyes were staring blankly. The two of them were great generals who had commanded millions of troops. So, they had seen and experienced many bloody scenes. But, they had never seen a person die in such a manner. Moreover, this person was an immortal expert who only existed in the legends. Huang Taiyang had sworn an oath before his death. And, they couldn't help but feel cold all over. Is this really the will of the heavens? Is there really a pair of eyes watching us? Is the heavens fair? The corners of Solitary Eagle's eyes twitched. He said in a hoarse voice, he's dead. Qian Sun Serpent Queen stared blankly at the two halves of the corpse on the ground. Then, she said as if she was sleep-talking, he's already in such a state. How could he still be alive? The solitary falcon shuddered, hugged his shoulders, and murmured, but the way he died is too. You tell me, he could have sworn an oath back then, but why did he have to make such a deadly oath? Damn it. He's making things difficult for himself. If he had made an oath to die a painless death, would he have ended up in such a state? Snake King looked at the corpse again. He couldn't help but retch. Then, he covered his mouth and ran away like a wisp of smoke. His agility was even faster than when he was fighting a while ago. It was too. Jun Zhantian stood there for a while with a complicated look on his face. Then, he finally said, let the servants clean up and bury him properly. After all, he's an expert of his generation. We can't be careless. It's getting late. Everyone should rest early. Then, Grandpa Jun and Jun Wuyi turned around and left in silence. Both of them had recently improved their strength. They had thought that they would rarely meet a worthy opponent after their increase in strength. At the very least, they had the qualifications to be the strongest in the world. But, they had witnessed the battle tonight. They had been so proud of their strength. But, they hadn't been able to contribute at all. Grandpa Jun and his son couldn't help but feel disappointed. As for Qian Sun Serpent Queen and Mei Xuan, since Jun Moxie did not take the initiative to introduce them to him, they must be two mysterious figures. Grandpa Jun naturally understood this logic. So, he simply did not ask any questions and went back to his room to sleep. Not far away, Mei Xuan stood there with her white dress fluttering in the wind. She sighed and said, it's a pity, such an expert above the Supreme Master level, couldn't have died in the desolate peak battlefield. Instead, he died here, the sadness of humanity. Jun Moxie laughed mischievously and said, this is indeed the tragedy of human nature. Such an expert above the Supreme Master level has such a character. It's fine if he doesn't. Miss May, you can't expect everyone to be like you, who holds the world in his heart and acts like a saint. TSK. I would rather cut my own throat if I were to rely on such a person to protect the continent. Mei Xuan looked at him and sighed softly. She then said, but, the continent's strength would have lost a strong expert. That battle, every small factor could have led to a crushing defeat. There are only a few people in the entire continent who have the same strength as this person. If by any chance, the strange races invade, then, the entire continent, the entire world. Jun Moxie rolled his eyes and sneered. He said, the rise and fall of the world has nothing to do with me. Don't talk to me about such a pain in the ass. So what if the strange races invade? If worst comes to worst, we'll just fight to the death. That's all. Don't tell me that all the strange races are experts above the Supreme Master level. I can't kill their strongest expert if they really invade. But, can't I kill the weaker ones? Those who deserve to die will die. Go to hell. How can you say that? Mei Shuyan was somewhat indignant. The success or failure of this battle will affect the next 10,000 years. If the strange races really do that, the entire continent might fall. You're a person of the continent. How can you not have any sense of responsibility? Sense of responsibility? Of course I do. But, I want to give you a piece of advice here. Don't give up your basic principles for this damned war for seizing the heavens. Blindly retreating will only make your opponent push forward. You can look at the big picture, but others may not be able to do so. There will always be disputes. Just like this time, if I don't kill him, the illusory Blood Sea and the Tian Fa forest will become mortal enemies after he returns. At that time, the storm will only be bigger, and more experts will die. Jun Moxie Lenglang looked at her and said, Miss May, I want to tell you seriously. When it's time to lose, the entire continent can be defeated. When it's time to lose, even a Silver Xian expert can win the war for seizing the heavens. I've never been afraid of a strong enemy. But, I'm extremely afraid of my own people who are as stupid as pigs. Moreover, the affairs of the world are unpredictable. Who can say for sure? Who knows when the pillar of heaven's mountains will collapse again, and those damn strange races will be crushed under it. Thinking about these things now might be a groundless worry. If you have so much free time, why don't you think about it properly and find a suitable man to marry? That's a serious matter, as well as an important matter of your life. Jun Dashao puffed out his chest as he said this, take me for example. In fact, you also know that this young master is elegant, talented, and handsome. I'm chivalrous, courageous, and overflowing with talent. I can be said to be the best match for you, Miss May. Moreover, you suddenly showed your female prowess last night, and molested me. So, you should take responsibility for that. This young master hasn't cried, thrown a tantrum, and hung himself to blame you. So, I'm already a gentleman. Mei Shuyan's face turned red in a split second. She pointed her finger at this shameless man. Her entire body trembled, and she couldn't speak a word. She finally managed to say something after a long while, you, how can you be so shameless? Mei Shuyan had moved unhindered throughout her life. It could be said that there were very few things that she didn't know, or didn't understand. Mei Shuyan always had her own opinion on whatever was said to her. Moreover, she could refute people until they were rendered speechless. But, she would be so embarrassed that she couldn't speak a word when it came to matters of love and marriage. Of course, this was only limited to Jun Moxie and Jun Dashao. She would have slapped anyone else into a meat patty if they had said such things to her. What? Toothless? How is that possible? Jun Moxie bared his teeth. His 2 rows of white and neat teeth sparkled under the moonlight. He smiled mischievously, this young master's teeth are very healthy. I don't eat sweets when I was a child. Moreover, I don't have any bad habits. I brush my teeth 2 or 3 times a day. But, I don't have any cavities. So, how can I be toothless? Miss May. I've bitten you. Don't you know that I have teeth? Ah, that's right. I've heard that only people who molest others are shameless. So, how can you say that I'm shameless? How can you say it the other way around? This young master is the one who's suffered a loss. You should be responsible for me. Miss May, you should think about it. You've molested me. You've kissed me. You've touched me. You've seen me. You've seen me. I'm helpless. But, I have no choice but to accept my fate. Who asked me to be such a pure person? Jun Dashao spoke in an extremely ambiguous and arrogant manner. Then, he politely said good night. Then, he complacently hummed a little tune, and went back to his room to sleep. Mei Xuan glared at his back. She gritted her teeth, and made a gee sound. I hadn't expected that this guy's shamelessness would surpass my expectations. I've become the shameless one in the end. Heavens! Earth! This is infuriating. God, please give me another expert like Huang Taiyang so that I can vent my anger. Perhaps the heavens didn't hear me. Or perhaps the number of experts like Huang Taiyang is too limited. In any case, Mei Xuan's wish wasn't fulfilled. However, Mei Xuan also knew that Jun Moxie's words had reminded her of one thing. I mustn't take the war for seizing the heavens too seriously. Everything is for the sake of preparing for the war for seizing the heavens. But, it has become a restraint on me. Weakness. In fact, the three holy lands can even take advantage of this if they want to target me. Jun Moxie must have been afraid that I wouldn't be able to bear it. So, his words were vulgar, but his intention was tactful. Like today. I should have killed Huang Taiyang with my own hands. The anger on Mei Xuan's face slowly disappeared as she thought about it. Then, a faint smile appeared on her face. So, this guy is also very considerate towards me. The sun rose as usual the next day. This world was like this. It didn't matter who or how many people had died yesterday. But, the sun would still rise the next day. Huang Taiyang hadn't returned for the entire night. And, this had caused the people of the illusory ocean of blood to panic. The Huang family was as anxious as ants on a hot pan. The distance between the two places wasn't short. But, Huang Taiyang wouldn't have needed an hour to travel to and fro with his strength. But, an entire night's time should have been enough for him to do anything. However, Huang Taiyang didn't return for an entire night. Before he left, he had confidently said, "It's just a bunch of clowns. I can take care of them with one hand. So, why do you need so many people? I'll be back before dawn. Just wait for the celebration." He had forcefully rejected the illusory ocean of blood's request to accompany him. The Huang family had even started to prepare food and wine that very night. They were looking forward to the triumphant return of their ancestor. Then, they would get drunk and celebrate their ancestor's victory. However, time passed little by little. And, Dongfang began to shine brightly. So, everyone couldn't remain calm any longer. Only when the sun had risen high in the sky did everyone fall into despair. Almost everyone's heart felt as if it had been weighed down by a big piece of lead. After all, the commotion last night wasn't small. Especially, the attack between Huang Taiyang and the two great masters. It had been earth-shaking. Even the Huang family had heard it clearly. In fact, they had even felt the ground beneath their feet shake a few times. It was obvious that Huang Taiyang had met an exceptionally strong opponent. Moreover, Huang Taiyang hadn't returned yet. And, all of their speculations were heading in the worst possible direction. The other four great masters of the illusory ocean of blood had proposed to provide reinforcements. But, they had been firmly stopped by the young lord, Huyan Shao. Huyan Shao's reason was very simple. Old Huang's martial power is the highest among all of us. He'll be able to solve the problem even if we don't go. But, he won't be able to escape if he's no match for the other party. In fact, he won't even be able to escape. Then, I'm afraid that all of us will be of no help even if we go. You're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.